Nee, 30 ton plus. Ons glo ons kan by 30 ton plus uit.
Okay, morning everyone. Tracy, I'll switch off the aircon now. All right. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Paul, is jy so iewers? Okay, lyk my van die manne slaap nog 'n bietjie laat vanoggend. Okay, I think we'll continue for now. You'll notice that today's session is a lot more informal. We prefer it that way. If you guys want to move forward, we want to try and create a bit of a more intimate situation where we can have informal discussions. So where yesterday was very formal in terms of what happened, and yes, someone's talking in front and you don't stop him, you don't ask questions. I would literally like it if you have a burning question that you stop us in the middle of our sentences and ask us, what's happening here. The first part of the session, of the first session, is going to be a bit more formal, just in terms of, I just want to give background first on what's happening, and then we continue and we actually go into practical explanations. So the idea is that we'll have a panel in front who either took part in whatever we did or that we approached and asked to sit in front regarding the issues. So for now, I don't want to waste too much time. We are a bit behind. But yeah, so I think without further ado, if I can ask Howard Blight to come to the front. I just want to mention from my side, Howard, it's the first opportunity I have to congratulate you about AGRI-Colleges. I was fortunate enough to sit in right in the beginning, and I have to say I'm amazed with what you've done. I think the whole idea about being cloud-based and moving away from bricks and mortar, it's the best thing that could ever happen, and congratulations from my side. Thank you.
The rubber behind your ear there. The other way around, sorry, the other ear.
Hello. Chairman, international guests and dignitaries, and what an incredible thing to have people from so many countries in the world which represent avocados. National delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This Maluma Symposium is about innovation, and we're going to talk about innovation, contextual to education, and a number of other things. I want to show you a short video about AGRI-Colleges International, which is the first in the world at its level of scalability across the world, and we're already having discussions with local delegates here about taking it to Peru, because we're already global. We've got the first student out of Ghana, which is amazing. And so we are global because it's on the cloud. And we're looking now to get the coursework translated into Spanish and into French. So I'd like to show you a short video. It's only 3 minutes.
Thousands of years ago, families lived in small groups, hunting and foraging for each meal. Then people domesticated certain plants and animals, and so agriculture was born. and gave rise to the development of civilizations. In the past 50 years, the world population has doubled. Today, roughly 7.5 billion people inhabit the Earth. It is estimated that by 2050, that number will have risen to 9 billion. To sustain our future, current food production levels must increase by 70%. Agriculture has been and will continue to be the heartbeat of this growth. There's an entire industry to help feed, clothe and provide for our growing population. Agriculture is more than just farming. It's thousands of careers in science, IT, marketing, education, finance and more, all with worldwide importance. There are millions of jobs available in agriculture, jobs which are right for the picking. Computers and tractors, sprayers and combines collect lots of data to help farmers create more food using less land, water and other resources. And now, education in agriculture has stepped up into the age of connectivity. AGRI-TECH International is helping people to grow their skills and knowledge in all aspects of farming. AGRI-TECH International is an online learning platform that is helping to create a more sustainable future for all. Because the AGRI-TECH International curriculum lives online, it is much more affordable than traditional brick-and-mortar learning institutions. Our courses are available anytime and from anywhere. Students can access the platform from any mobile device or computer. Learning is literally in the palm of your hands. Our global accessibility allows students to communicate with fellow students from all around the world. Our training programs include technical support and online access to lecturers. Our online learning platform provides a full end-to-end cloud-based service with on-demand access to course materials, student forums, chat groups, and more. Our courses are widely recognized across the agriculture sector and affiliated agri-industries. So whether you're a student or an agriculture professional, AGRI-TECH International has a study course designed just for you. Choose one of our accredited certificate programs to help you kickstart your career in the agricultural industry, or participate in our wide variety of short courses to grow your skills and grow your career in agriculture. The future of the planet and human existence is quite literally in our hands. Apply today and take your place in the oldest and most significant industry in the world. Visit agricolleges.com or follow us at AGRI-TECH on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.
And it's perhaps no coincidence, as Zander said, that he was one of the very first people that I spoke to back in October 2015, after we returned from the World Congress in Peru, where the concept of AGRI-TECH International was born. And he joined our team of innovators. And you've seen today many reasons why that happened. And this audience of farmers and their peers here today, as followers of the journey of Maluma, will be challenged and have been challenged and guided through many perspectives of farming that you may not have thought about and have been exposed to. And the evolution continues to breach the walls of conventional thinking, driven by the Ernst family with the doctor at the helm. Let me offer you what AGRI-TECH International claims to be the first tech oxymoron. The speed with which change is happening in our world has never been as fast as it is today. And the rate of change will never again be as slow as it is today. There are two collective nouns for innovators. There's a disruptor of creative thinkers, or a delusion of creatives. And so the challenge is to disrupt conventional thinking and to change it for the better. And for this, creative thinkers need perhaps to be slightly delusional. So you can all look at the person next door to you with a different and more circumspect view. To remain cost-effective and to expand our horizons, we as farmers have to endure the winds of change, knowing that they've come in and been blown in on the cloud. As an example, Zander himself would like to study further in the principles of irrigation design. He feels the need to upscale his intricate knowledge and contextuality of being able to more accurately interpret and understand his own irrigation systems, as well as those being presently prepared and designed by the likes of, for Allesbeste by Beckmar Irrigation, who are represented here today. And this would entail numerous trips to Johannesburg, with travel and accommodation expenses, sitting in lectures, downtime off the farm, neglecting his family, and the stress of the whole experience. In today's world, this has become possible by remaining at home while studying an entire course on the cloud via e-learning through organizations such as AGRI-TECH International, at a fraction of the cost of the conventional bricks and mortar institutions, as well as embracing all the practical aspects of these courses. And this process is referred to as the blended learning and shared learning in the tech world of e-learning. In order to first visualize the concept and necessity for us as farmers to change and modernize the way we grow avocados, we need to access the information required. The Avo short course is one of those being presently designed and offered and will be shortly available at AGRI-TECH International, together with macadamias and table grapes and citrus and maize. And we have got 45 short courses designed for the Southern African crop, with all the crops that are relevant to our agri-industry. The Avo study group concept is all well and good and must continue. That feel, touch, and see remains vital to the whole process. But deeper, clearer insights are required. There needs to be an academic approach to upscale the skills and knowledge base of farmers. A more definitive understanding of the intricacies of soil science, and therefore soil preparation, is required. And the offline practicals that we do, because we do have practicals destinations, and people are asking us, how do you implement the blended learning concept, which is the transferring of those academic processes into the practical application. So the student has all his learning is done on a mobile device, and he will take that mobile device and put it onto a tripod, and then start talking, filming himself on the platform, and taking the soil sample, talking himself and the lecturer through the process that he understands from the academic interpretation into the practical. He has a spade, he cuts the soil at 300 mils, takes the topsoil, the bottom soil, the subsoil. He talks about pH, the micro-macro elements, talks through the whole process with his chat group of 10 to 20 students with him or following him online. And this process can happen offline or online. But immediately he's completed his task, he can post that, and it's onto the cloud and in Canada for marking in 15 seconds. The piloting of drones will become more commonplace, together with the training and interpretation of the filmed data, of leaf deficiencies becoming mandatory in the upscaling process of farmers today. The setting of programs for your Netafin or other irrigation system on one's mobile device. We were farming in Mozambique for many years. We're setting the irrigation system from a mobile device 1,000 kilometers away. Has now become possible. Ordered record keeping in a digital format will improve efficiencies, with the written word and reports becoming outdated almost before they go to print. And there is an automatical digital data capture together with wages and salaries directly into bank accounts, with all this information stored on the cloud instantly and safe. In days gone by, the collective noun for farmers was a graft of farmers or a whinge of farmers. That too has changed. Today and into the future, the collective noun for farmers is a wisdom of farmers or a harvest of farmers. And this is so because this is the way it is today. In 2016, we entered the age of innovation. And today, more than 50% of the world's population have access to the cloud. We as farmers must always ensure that we have access to the cloud for a multiplicity of disciplines, as well as engage in study courses on the cloud via e-learning, learning management system, or LMS. And our LMS is Brightspace. It was for the best learning management system in the world last year. They already have 15 million students studying online through Brightspace. And we're the first AGRI organization to do that. And we have a collaboration agreement with Stellenbosch University. They're also shareholders in AGRI-TECH International. We're getting our coursework, best in class, from Stellenbosch University and other organizations. All our short courses are peer-reviewed by at least 2 professionals in the field. AGRI-TECH International offers information to farmers as well as to farm workers through many easy access, e-learning cloud-based. And in the NQF4, which is matric level, and NQF5 and 6 certified courses, we are accredited by the AGRI-CETA of this country, and will be accredited by other AGRI-CETAs in the other countries as we go north in the continent. The upskilling education process will replace conventional bricks and mortar institutions throughout the world. And we see that the agricultural colleges in this country have virtually collapsed to the last, dealing now with subsistence farming, outdated coursework, the roof is falling off. They're going to become null and void. The cost of maintaining bricks and mortar institutions will supersede what you have on the cloud, where we've got no bricks and mortar. So the courses are a quarter of the price of the conventional bricks and mortar institutions. One of the innovations being designed at the moment is to encourage farmers to buy a mobile smartphone and keep it in your offices, so that your farm workers can come in on Saturday mornings and after hours and do adult literacy. Imagine the increased level of productivity by simply getting people to understand what they read and to record what they do. The context of that in Africa is very real. There's a huge opportunity there. Individual crop relevant courses are being flighted as we speak in what we call the Learn as You Earn program, where the short courses are for every one of us sitting here today to upgrade our skills, and for our section managers and our managers to contextually learn just that little bit more about the subject at hand, together with techniques in farm management, accounting, and so forth. AGRI-TECH's practicals destinations have continued to be established. We already have 36 throughout the country. We'll end up with hundreds and hundreds, not only here but north of our borders, where the students may go, if there's a full year course, they may go to one of these practicals destinations for a week or two and spend some time doing the blended learning application of the theory into practical. By continuously forewarned fellow farmers that the winds of change are howling over our farms. The good news is that they blow in the cloud. The better news is that they've blown in the rain that we've been all praying for so desperately more recently, and I believe there's more to come. We are faced with perpetual rising costs, and access to the cloud and the upskilling of knowledge base, increased efficiency and higher productivity output will ensure that we remain ahead of the game to enjoy the lifestyle that we so cherish. And this should include the planting of more Maluma avocados to boot. We, the commercial farmers, represent the future of food security for our world. It is commonly believed that the 2 key factors for our collective security in this country is agri-education and agri-transformation. The concept of us sharing agri-information we have with the up-and-coming emerging farmers is vital to the essence of Ubuntu. We are because you are, and it needs to be a collective, and people listen to me very carefully. We have to embrace the concept that I'm referring to, which is the collective Ubuntu, which is the concept of transformation. And Subtrop has the Transformation Summit every year. I've been a key speaker there, keynote speaker there twice already. And we must come aboard this conceptual. We have the knowledge, we continue to embrace the knowledge, and we need to share it with the up-and-coming emerging farming group, because this is about relationship development, relationship building, and it is vital to the future of our security, our collective security in this country. So the collective noun for a group of geniuses is a savvy of geniuses. Are we, wisdom of farmers, savvy? Of course we are. That's why we're all gathered here today. And therefore, this harvest of farmers at this Maluma Symposium must strive to become. And by doing so, we will change the world that we live in and make it a better place. I wish you all good luck with this task, and I have 5 slides to show you to bring a rather frightening contextuality to what I'm talking about. That you leave, and these slides will be available for you to leave with accepting the responsibility that you're being offered at an organization like the Maluma, like the Ernst family. Take that responsibility. Go home with it, sit with it, and change the world. This is global food security. It's on a scorecard. And in the United States and in Europe and in Australia, the scorecard is at 74 to 86% in terms of their known vulnerability to food security. And look at where Africa is. It's sitting with a score of 24 to 40 maybe. South Africa, okay. But we saw the vulnerability of South Africa 2 years ago when we had a failed maize crop because of the drought. And I'd just like to say that these slides are shown with the courtesy of AGRI-SA. This was a summit that I was at in Cape Town in December, so please, I would like to just acknowledge that. We've left there. World population growth. We talked about 7.5 now and 9 by 2050. And in 2050, 2.5 billion people will live in Africa. We have 800 million at the moment. Look what's happening in India, because there's no one-child policy in the family development. It's expanding and squeezing China out with their one-child policy. Look at Europe and the Americas and Australia shrinking in terms of their understanding for the necessity to maintain modest population growths. So between Africa and Asia and East Asia, we will have as many people living there as there are on the earth today. 7.5 billion. The rest will be scattered around, the others shrinking. But here's where the movie really begins to get frightening. Tertiary education is being neglected on our continent. And we've seen people here from Namibia, from Mozambique. We have delegates from Zambia, we have delegates from the new emerging Zimbabwe. It will not happen unless there's proper tertiary education. And so Agricultures International, fortuitously, the timing is perfect, is coming aboard with a very scalable opportunity. Rest secure that wherever you develop your avocados, you will have access to an avocado course or a macadamia course or whatever else you wish to grow during the course of the next few months. It's already started. You can go into our website and have a look. But if you compound this with the next slide, there's no understanding of mechanization. So who wants to start the first Uber tractor venture? Talk to John Deere. They're available. Buy a tractor, plow your ground, and then lease it out to 50 people in your immediate area. But contextually, if we educate the emerging African group of people, the emerging African, the previously disadvantaged communities, they too will be able to participate in this opportunity for populating our continent with tractors and with education. It's an incredible slide. It's a mind-bogglingly frightening slide. I want to thank you for your indulgence. Take home some of the sincerity with which I have been privileged to pass this information on. Communicate with us at Agroecologists International, and we can help you become better farmers to help our world. The very last slide is slightly out of context. Oh, sorry, okay, the number of farming units. Look how the number of farming units, in other words, farms are getting larger. And there's huge opportunities in Africa because land still north of our borders is fairly cheap. I talked to a farmer today, they bought a 170-hectare farm in Mozambique with deep red soils and abundance of water for 2.3 million rand. That's like, here they're paying that for 10 hectares. And you can see how it's changing. You've got the subsistence farmers, the smaller farmers, the emerging farmers taking up the bulk of that grouping, how it's changing. The demographic is changing in terms of who and where the ownership is. This is the privileged few that are sitting at the top of that triangle. And the last slide is about innovation. I went to this facility to check it out, see if it was good. And this woman has been making paint for 20 years. This is of the highest quality with all the ingredients, all the polymers. It's a world-class paint for your orchards. And they've added zinc and boron. And there's the telephone number. We're going to leave that slide. The fact that this woman is my wife has got nothing to do with it. No, sincerely, have a look at it. We've done the trials. I spoke to Dr. Guy Whitney yesterday, who just pointed out that, and we said we're making no claims about the zinc and boron, but simply as it leaches, it'll go into the soil, and the roots will take it up in whatever quantity that is. So it's the first in the world, tree paint with zinc and boron. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. I want to thank you for fitting us in. He's on his way to Europe and he literally just came in this morning, so thank you very much for that. I perhaps neglected just to mention that a lot of the workshop today, or actually the whole of it, will revolve down a road of precision farming that we want to follow for the years to come. We started with it a bit last year, but I'll speak more about it later on. The first few items you'll see are all highlighted in black. That's basically our platinum sponsors. And a lot of these people have been walking a road with us for a long time, and that's also why we give them time on the program. The next people the next person is Gareth Tuffney. And they did trials in the nursery initially. We didn't think that we could improve the root growth in the nursery, but they did a superior job. And we're busy with trials in the orchard, but he will tell you more about it. Thanks.
I prefer to use that. Good morning. Thank you, Zander, for that introduction. And I think before I begin, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Allesbeste team. We're very grateful to be able to present at this event. So I think as I start off, I'd just like to introduce the company and who we are. So you would have seen the banners and the buckies around. We are Team AGRI. In terms of how we fit in as a company, we're a subsidiary of the ROELIER group, which is operating outside of France. As a company, we're employing 7,000 individuals the world around. We have over 400 researchers, and we're active in about 60 countries. Basically, our point is to bring cutting-edge technology that's impacting on farmers' daily lives. We're very privileged to interact with farmers on a daily basis, and at the end of the day, we want to improve your lives, bring value, and actually improve how your farming practices are being conducted. So I think to start off with, I wanted to look at what the outcomes of any precision agriculture system should be. It's all well and good if we devolve into what you're doing without actually keeping sights on what you should be doing and what the end goal should be. So what I wanted to look at is just to stress the point that it's the use of technology to give us the opportunity to better manage how crops are growing, how they're producing. We need to be looking at increasing efficiency with our dwindling resources. I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that things like peak phosphorus are coming, peak oil is coming. So in order to better use these resources that are on a daily basis becoming limiting, we need to look at technology to help us better use that. I think other aspects, we need to look at our improved production, we need to start making better informed management decisions, be it rootstock selection or irrigation design. And I think lastly, I don't need to tell you how risky agriculture can be. So I think by able to quantify these risk factors, we can move forward with our production. And then again, I'm trying to keep it brief, but I just wanted to make a list of the technology that I have seen is out there, and it's starting to make a positive impact on precision agriculture. So we're starting off with your garden variety global positioning systems. I've seen strides with drone development in terms of your NDVI imagery, but also thermal sensors. And I think lastly, with the rise of the Internet of Things, we're seeing communication between data collecting devices on the rise. There was an excellent presentation last year, if you had the pleasure to see it, which covered this topic in depth. And I think the last point I want to make there is we're moving into an era where data is freely available. It's vast amounts, and what's going to make the difference is our ability to process and analyze these data. We've had the privilege to be working with companies that are designing these systems, and it's actually quite scary how quickly these systems are able to learn, adapt, and actually bring insight from big data sets. But I think wherever we go, in whatever direction the precision agriculture industry goes, we must never forget that farmers' footsteps will always be the best fertilizer. And what I mean by that is we need to be able to look at these data in the context of what's happening in the orchard. We enter into these systems with insights, trends, patterns, and analysis. But if you're not looking what's actually going on in the field with the crop, you're losing sight of what the end goal is. So I've just listed 5 properties that I would like to look at in context when I start discussing the results a bit later. Obviously, we're dealing with soil variability, moisture supply issues. Obviously, soil fertility will then come into play. We have disease pressure. And I think lastly, we have environmental stress that needs to be dealt with. So again, what our challenge is here is to actually identify and manage these in a meaningful and constructive way. Ultimately, it's no point if we can correct and assess, but we've done it in a season after. So basically, our focus should be that last line there. I think I've just given a couple of points which I believe we're going to be dealing with a bit later on. So just bear these in mind as we go through. So we're talking about irrigation and scheduling issues. I have made a point there, variable drip irrigation. I think for me, this is a technology for the future, and I'm keeping a close eye on it. We can look at our grid sampling and your corrective measures for your soil fertility. Pests and disease. We're seeing very interesting work with thermal scans, picking up diseased and sick trees. And I think lastly, you have your environmental stress, and this is where we start looking at the data loggers, the influence of topography on how your orchards are going to be performing. So I think the last point I want to take with is the cross-correlation between these factors. Obviously, soil type is going to be impacting on how environmental stress will impact your trees. Your depth of your soil is going to determine how you would describe and define your irrigation system, and also how the trees are going to be responding to this. So I think just bear in mind what the cross-chatter is between these properties. So I think at this point, before I start discussing the nursery trials, I just want to introduce the product we have been using, just to give you a bit of a background. So in terms of our design philosophy at ROELIER, it's more a case of what a product should do as opposed to what a product can do. So if we take Fertile GZ, which is the product we were testing, basically the properties that we wanted to take from this product was a stimulated root system, stimulated photosynthetic potential, nutrient availability, and then also strengthening the plant's ability to handle stress, be it in the nursery or in the orchard. So in terms of the nursery trial that we did, we looked at 4 stages of production, from germination to rooting the microclones. We're looking at grafting, and then eventually planting the plants out. And just visually assessing how we were getting along, we can see with the germination stage, the product actually had a nice impact on the root mass. Carrying on to the next stage, we actually saw the same sort of response at the microclone stage. In terms of planting out, we're seeing a very nice response with the root mass in the bags. And then lastly, we're looking at the final product. So I think in terms of where we're seeing the product fit in, it's actually bringing benefit to all of the stages within the nursery. I think we did a couple of stats on just how it was performing. So what we were looking at here is the stem diameter at the microclone stage. And we can see we did actually increase the mean stem, but we also got quite a nice cluster of the results. I mean, the result was consistent across the plants that we tested. Going forward, we also looked at the root mass. So obviously the variation between the samples was a little bit higher here, but again, we saw a nice positive increase with the rooting mass of the microclones. And I think the important thing we want to take home here is we saw this increase in root mass with an increase in the stem diameter. So irrespective of the fact that we are using a product that stimulates the roots, we're seeing a nice increase in the overall health and vigor of the plant. So I think just to sum up what we were seeing in the nursery, was obviously the root stimulation, which is what the product is designed for, but stem diameter was a nice response, and I think also visually the plants are looking a bit healthier, the flushes are there, and in terms of them leaving the nursery, they're in a better position to handle stress. It is still early days, but our initial estimates are we're going to be able to reduce the actual time per plant in the nursery, and you can start to think what this has an impact on the turnaround time. So I think the next question is obviously we saw these phenomenal results in the nursery. What is going to happen when we start treating plants that have been planted out? Okay, we're back online. So taking trees that had been planted out in the field, we obviously treated them with our product. And for me, the visual results are very encouraging at this stage. So we can see in terms of the root mass there, we've got a nice response, and it was consistent with what we were seeing in the nursery. Zooming in a bit, I think, tells the whole story. So I mean, what we're seeing is obviously extensive root systems that have left that planting media and actually starting to explore the soil. So I think if we come back to this slide and just consider what the impact of that stimulated root system is going to be having on these factors that we listed about the precision agri challenges. Yeah, obviously with a stimulated root system, we're going to be exploring the soil a bit better. Water issues start becoming less of an impact. Nutrient availability. Yeah, we're looking at questions of pest and disease resistance, just because we've given these plants a better chance to actually deal with environmental pressure. So I think at the end of the day, we can look at products like GZ and just ask ourselves what the potential is if we take precision agriculture technology and we move it into the root zone. I think we're giving ourselves a bit more flexibility and a bit more control. But I think ultimately, if we're looking at this in the context of other technology, we have a valuable tool that's going to allow you to pick up the gaps where something like a grid classification does not give you all the answers, where something like a soil moisture probe isn't able to account for all the problems. Thank you. I think I can take any quick questions. Yes. Well, we do have our stall outside. You're welcome to come and meet myself and the rest of the team. We can discuss about any questions you have over the products.
Well, that's a good inside job. Thanks, Gareth. Thank you so much. I think before we continue, I actually wanted to do this earlier. I just quickly want to ask Willem from Netafim to the front, just to give him a small gift of appreciation. As you know, Netafim and Backma are the main sponsors. I'll definitely give polls to him later, but Willem, thank you for the instrumental role you've been playing. All right, next on the program is Simon Tattersall from AFRUPRO. Simon, I don't know what you've been bribing us behind the screens, but you have a good presence here. So, yeah, welcome.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Zander, thank you very much for this opportunity to chat to all the Maluma Symposium attendees. Thank you very much. I noticed on the agenda that the first topic to be discussed was precision farming. do you really grasp the extent of the concept?
Hallo? Toets, 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 toets. Toets. 1, 2. Nee, werkt niet. Oké. Als een valse uit. Oké. Shot. So, speak. Toets. Maybe give it a shot. Just keep it nearby, so if it starts working, then at least. So apparently
Testing.
Sorry, there's a phase out, so I'm going to shout a bit. Sorry. No worries. Let me just start again. I just on the agenda, the first topic to be discussed was precision farming. We really grasped the extent of the concept. I find this topic rather interesting for two reasons. Firstly, as an intermediary in the avocado sector. Secondly, because AFRUPRO represents an organization which traditionally packed and marketed fruit or avocados on behalf of individual growers, both large and small.
12-month supply. Better economies of scale resulting from precision farming. And this is a big reason you may or not know of the massive structural changes that have occurred within AFRUPRO. This is a reason why we've structured ourselves with companies like Allesbeste Nursery, AGRI-TECH, AFRUPRO Investments, Food Imprint. We don't want to get left behind. We need to have the ability to offer all the tools to our growers. In conclusion, precision farming, do we really grasp the extent of the concept? As an intermediary, I say no, not yet, but we will. Intermediaries, like exporters, need to provide the growers with all their tools to be successful in supplying consistent quality fruit 12 months of the year. Thank you very much.
All right, Simon, I really apologize for that. Unfortunately, ESCOM does play a role. Or the municipality rather. Yeah, then next up, I don't know whether John Hyde is here. Okay, no, is he not here? No, all right. He says he is a bit shy, so I kept him on the program, and because I just felt we should thank him. So if he's still here when you go out for tea, please stop by Trophy and thank him. He's been involved since the beginning, and he's been sponsoring the bar every year. And I think quite a bit of you, looking at what time you guys showed up this morning, definitely enjoyed the bar. Then next up will be myself, just with regards to, do we really grasp the full concept of precision agriculture? Edrean, ek is nie seker of jy nou al wil afkom nie. Dink met die technical probleme gaan dit dalk pla. Alright, so I'll carry on with that. Okay, I'm literally going to read this. It's a scenario that they created. It says, imagine you're a farmer riding along in your 50,000 acre wheat field early in the growing season. You push a button on your tractor to turn on its global positioning system monitor, which pinpoints your exact location to within 1 meter. Touching one button, you display a series of geographical information system maps that show where the soil in your field is moist, where the soil eroded over the winter, and where there are factors within the soil that limit crop growth. Next, you upload remote sensing data collecting just yesterday. Collected just yesterday. That shows where your budding new crop is already thriving and areas with where it is. You hit send to upload this data into an onboard machine that automatically regulates the application of fertilizer and pesticides. Just the right amount and exactly where the chemicals are needed. You sit back and enjoy the ride, saving money as the machines do most of the work. Congratulations, you are among a new generation growers called precision farmers. So the problem I want to create with this is that's a product that's sold by one input supplier, sometimes two maybe. But it's a product that has been created for maize farmers and other types of farmers across the globe, which, as the case study points out, at the push of a button. Now, we sit in a situation with the crop that we farm with is a lot more complex. There's a lot more stages involved, and a lot less can be done by machine. So, theoretically, then shouldn't we try and redefine this, and where does precision farming fit into our type of agriculture? So at the end of the day, we need to look at this and say, can we then not be involved in precision farming? So does this exclude us? So just a few definitions. Precision farming is management concept based on observing, measuring, and responding to inter and intra-field variability in crops. The goal of precision farming or agriculture research is to define a decision support system for whole farm management within the goal of optimizing returns on inputs with preserving resources. So if you look at that definition, then you don't really see much about mechanization. It's more about the gathering of information and reacting to that. I went onto a few websites. I tried to choose a few that's not represented here, otherwise people start fighting over tea. So AFGRI, it's about more productive and more efficient. Precision agriculture farmers and soils work better, not harder. Being site-specific and information-specific as in the most precise way of informing farming decisions. Farmers use precision agricultural practices to apply nutrients, water, seeds, and other agricultural inputs to grow more crops in a wide range of soil environments. Help farmers to know much and when to apply these inputs. Yara, precision farming is a key to best agricultural management practices. It enables farmers to add the specific nutrients needed for their crop in exactly the right amount. So without reading everything again, I think you pick up on the trend. So I sat back and I thought, okay, if I have to pinpoint a few things, that's my list that is available today. GPS and GPSS technology, drones and NDVI, Trimble and other technologies, sowing machines, harvesting machines such as combine harvesters, fertilizer application by machine, irrigation with center pivots, automized, and soil mapping. Precision farming has become an adopted term for the use of satellite technology integrated with high-tech equipment. Harvesting with combine harvesters, manage fertilizer applications, irrigation applications, soil mapping and planting, and facilitate coordination between these activities to improve production and efficiencies to increase profits. So if we look at the fruit industry, that's really what's available to us at a cost. So GPS, we have drones, we have access to it. NDVI is available, but I don't believe we really know yet exactly what to do with the NDVI. Trimble is there, there's cheaper options, but we can't walk into a tractor shop and buy a tractor with Trimble technology on it. So we have to invent it. And no one's doing it for us. Precision planting, it's not on the market. We're not putting trees in a precision way. Harvesting machines, not available. Fertilizer application by machine, debatably available. It's possible to create it, but again, how precise will we be able to do it? Irrigation efficiencies is debatable in the sense that when you look at what they explain under the center pivot situation, we're not yet at that level. So I think we can still improve on it, but it is there. And soil mapping. Is this really what the total farming activities is on your farm? Does this represent farming as a whole? Or is this what I mentioned, just parts of farming? So farming as a whole, I put a few more things up. And we can probably add to that list. So just to highlight a few, shouldn't you be optimizing on labor? If you look at inputs and profitability, labor plays a huge role in that. So how precise are you using your labor? How well are you measuring it? And how well are you managing it? Fertilizer application, definitely something in conjunction with soil mapping that we can improve a lot on, and it ties into irrigation. Procurement, obviously by managing your processes on your farm a lot better, procurement will improve and the precision thereof. Harvesting, our harvesting is a lot more complex in the sense that we have maturities, we have different microclimates maturing at different rates, different cultivars, different times of the year, different market opportunities, different market windows. So how precise are you managing that to optimize on profit without obviously trying to play the market, but really doing your best in being there all the time? Pruning, it's very difficult to get to the point that you do precise pruning. And again, looking back at what we presented yesterday about high density plantings, that's the closest that we're getting to precise pruning. And now, you know, if you walk to the Falco shop outside, you'll see that they have an electrical pruning kit that keeps track of every click the scissor makes. So you can actually count the amount of clicks. But again, someone will have to manually input that into a computer. But at least then you know how many clicks the person is making. So you have a better idea of how precise, you know, you are managing your labor. But then you need the ability to know precisely which branch to prune to get the best crop. So it becomes very complicated. Calibrations, mistblower calibrations. It's, I think, one of the most neglected things in terms of fruit farming. People do their mix and they don't really look at the tractor speed. Our tractors' gearboxes aren't calibrated, so it's not always the exact same speed. Every time you drive it in slow 3 or low 3, it gives you a different speed. As soon as you start pulling weight, the speed changes again. So you have to look at calibrations and get it as accurate as possible. But again, the product's not available. There are tractors, I think there's an Italian make that is calibrated on the gears, but then again, mistblowers, you know, getting to the point that each nozzle is calibrated so you know exactly what you sprayed. And then other crop-specific activities. So I think we can highlight a few more activities there. And our idea is that from today onwards, with each year, with every Maluma Day, we try and address some of these issues, and we start going into that and saying, how can we as an avocado industry pioneer precision farming in the fruit industry? And this is not about what is Allesbeste going to do. It's about what are we as industry doing to try and address this. And that's partially what we'll do with the panel, is it's parts of products being supplied by someone or someone that has done work on some of these issues that help us to get closer to precision farming. So the challenge I want to put out there is get involved as an input supplier, get involved with us, with other farmers, and try and get us closer to precision farming. This is very important to me. If you look at definitions on the internet, you would get the idea that precision farming is equal to satellite farming, and it is not. Precision farming, if you look at the bigger definition, let me phrase it differently. Precision farming has become satellite farming. That's the equivalent. Wherever you read about it, there's some form of satellite technology involved in it. So theoretically, we should develop our own term for this thing that should actually be precision farming. Because today we think that precision farming is just a product you buy off someone. Someone could come to you on your farm and say, here's my precision farming package. But it only involves a small part of the business. So it's actually getting to the point that we get to something that is really precision farming that involves a lot more steps. So it's not about being arrogant, it's about thinking about what fruit farming involves and how much more we need to calculate and how many things can we literally manage at the moment today just on an Excel spreadsheet, knowing more precisely what's happening on your day-to-day activities. And other technologies, obviously. Just mentioned that. Precision farming or precision agriculture, there's an assumption that it needs sophisticated technology. We've touched on it in the past. You can use simple technology. Simple things are available, and sometimes it's a little paper in the back of your car or your bakkie that you are making notes on, you know, that helps you farming more precise. It's a lot of times insignificant changes that you make to your daily business that improves your position in terms of how precise you are managing your farm. And like I mentioned, in all likelihood, we should give it a new definition. So we should work towards something more encompassing. Yeah. Good. I think that's that. I'm not going to take questions now because we're going to start to work through this and we're a bit behind on the program. So I just want to try and make up time. So what I want to do first, and this will basically build up my panel as we go along, is firstly give Marnus Ferreira from AGRI-TECH the opportunity. The rest of the session will be about land development and how precisely we can do land development. And remember what I said is we want to take some of these issues that I highlighted that we need to do more precisely and each year tackle something. So this year we are addressing in terms of precise management. We're looking at land development, how precisely can we do that? We're looking at labor, how precisely can we manage labor? And we'll also be looking at harvesting technology for avocados. So next year it might be 3 different things. It might be that when we walk away here today, we get so many new ideas that we might come back to land development, we might come back to labor next year. But I think, again, it's about building a product. So, Marnus, if I can ask you just give a quick rundown from a soil perspective, what the most important things are to address in land development.
Was I? All right. Sorry, I'm not used to speaking with all this technology. It's a bit strange. All right, thanks for the opportunity. I want to start off by saying there's a hell of a lot of technology and there's a hell of a lot of innovation connected with precision farming at the moment, which is all great and it's fantastic, and we're going a very far way into the future with all of this stuff. But I want to step back just a little bit to the basics. Go right back to the basics. What is precision farming? What is farming? What is our most important thing that we farm with? And that is soil. I'm a soil scientist, so I'm slightly biased in this respect. I'm very passionate about soil and soil preparation, and especially something like irrigation. Because at the end of the day, you farm with roots, whether you like it or not. And you irrigate soil, whether you like it or not. You don't irrigate trees or plants. Yes, they take water out of the soil, that's true. But you irrigate soil. And the soil determines how much irrigation you should do, how much water you should put down, where your block should be. All right, so if you're doing orchard layouts, you should always look at your soil. It is the most important thing. It's what you buy at the end of the day. When you buy a farm, you buy soil. So why not utilize it? Why not know exactly what the hell is going on in your soil, where to irrigate, where to plant, and which areas not to plant, for example, and which areas to cultivate and prepare the soil correctly. So that's more or less what I'm going to be talking about very briefly. All right, so I'm going to take you through what is soil when I talk about this stuff. This is a very rudimentary sketch. So I'm going to talk about just a little bit of background about what is soil in the different areas I'm going to be talking about. There we go. So that's the topsoil. All right. Below that, we have the subsoil, which is more or less that section above your parent material. Okay. So that's very basically what's going on in a soil profile. So I'm going to give you some examples. Okay, so your topsoil, what is your topsoil? Your topsoil is effectively where your microbial activity lives. It's where most of your nutrient uptake and your roots take place. It is the single most important part of your soil profile. All right, so all your little bugs, all your microbial activity, which effectively enhance your nutrient uptake, they make the minerals that you put into the ground, all your fertilizer, they enable your plant to take that up. They also assist with breaking down inorganic material. So they eat organics. So your organic material and your microbial life in your topsoil is essential. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, your topsoil. That's where most of this stuff live. They live to about 400 millimeters, 40 centimeters in the soil. That's that much, and that's it. That's where these bugs live. And they are the most important part of your soil profile. Below that, we have the subsoil, and the arrows indicate where those things are. Now, the subsoil is typically where your limiting layer is. Okay, so most of your root development takes place in the top 400 millimeters, but if your subsoil has problems, if your subsoil has any kind of issue, that's going to impact your topsoil directly. For example, on the left there, if you take a digger, an excavator, and you dig a lacquer little hole, a pit, you see they dug all the way to 1.1 meters, and the farmer thinks, here's lacquer. I have a very great piece of soil, it's very deep, it's 1.1 meters deep, but in essence, your entire subsoil, all the red stuff there on the left, is completely saturated. That's your water table. So what's going to grow there? Nothing. Unless you're planting something that sucks up a lot of water and is water tolerant. If you're planting a tree, you're effectively farming with 300 millimeters, even though you have a very deep soil pit. So your subsoil is where your problems exist, and that's going to directly influence your topsoil, which is your effective zone, your most important zone. And you'll see the middle picture, very nice, deep, well-drained profile. But in that case, it's dry land farming, it's maize planting, and you have very, very, very little topsoil, which is your most important section for initial root flush and root development. So this is where soil health becomes a very important question. How do you improve that topsoil? How do you increase your topsoil? How do you get microbial life back into your topsoil to make your soil alive again? Because soil breathes, and it eats, and it needs food. Food, organic matter, fertilizer for the plants, and your bugs are the things that make those things plant available. And then your parent material. Soil on the left is an extremely shallow soil. So there's your topsoil. You have no subsoil, and you're straight on your parent material. Look how shallow that soil is. This is in the Western Cape. In the Western Cape, we're used to farming on dirt, on rock. Turning rock into soil is our game. That's effectively what we do. So our parent material is the thing that determines what kind of soil. Oh, that's fine. No, that's all right. Okay. So our parent material is the stuff that weathers, it breaks down inorganically, and it turns into soil. Okay. So we're on. All right, so I'm just going to quickly focus on the 4 most important soil aspects, in my opinion. Now, there's a hell of a lot of soil aspects that you can look at that make a huge difference to your farming and to your root system and to your soil potential. Okay, but these are the 4 basic things because I only have a short amount of time. It's soil forms, i.e. what kind of soil is it? So if we look at our subsoils, it's the different variations thereof. Is it well drained? Is it waterlogged? Is there excessive leaching going on? Is it extremely shallow, for example? So that's your soil form determines, there's about 73 recognized soil forms at the moment in South Africa, of which there are subfamilies, which pushes it up to something about 400 different soil families. So there's a hell of a lot of variation in South African soils. Then potential rooting depth. How deep is your soil? You could have a soil profile that's this deep, all of it's well drained, it looks beautiful, but your effective rooting depth might only be 300 millimeters because of some problem. And you need to know what those physical problems are in the soil so that you can address them. Okay. So even though it appears as a deep, well-drained lacquer soil, it might be extremely shallow for your roots. And you need to know that before you start planting, before you start doing soil preparation. Then texture. Texture determines effectively your irrigation. Okay, so your infiltration tempo, it also determines how you should cultivate your soil, or how you should prepare your soil, because certain textures lend themselves better to deep cultivation or shallow cultivation, or you have to turn the soil over, or in certain cases, never turn the soil over. And that's all determined by the texture in your soil. And then the last thing I'm going to put in is wetness. All right, I'm going to touch on exactly what that is. That is not available soil moisture to the plant, that's excessive moisture. Okay, so very briefly, soil forms. There are 4 soil forms that I've put up there. All 4 of those soil forms you can find on one farm. You can find 8, you can find 10, you can find 20. or you could find 1 or 2 soil forms on your farm. And those things all determine how your roots are going to grow, how well they're going to do, or how poorly they're going to do, and where your high potential areas are. And you need to identify where your high potential areas are to plant your very expensive development. Okay, it costs a hell of a lot of money to put these things in the ground, so let's choose the best sites. So the one there at the top, for example, that one has an extremely leached subsoil on top of rock. Okay, this is very particular and very typical of Humansdorp, Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth area. We have a very nutrient-rich topsoil and an extremely leached subsoil. And that's going to determine how you should ridge, how you should prepare your soil. In this case, if you plant something there and you don't ridge, for example, your plant is going to thrive in that topsoil, and in there it's only going to put down 1 or 2 roots because it's completely leached, it's alluviated, you've lost all of your nutrients, it easily gets waterlogged, so your roots, it's not a happy growing medium for your roots, it's effectively the desert of soils. Okay, so in this case, you're going to have to ridge as high as you possibly can, only using the topsoil, only using your A horizon, because that's effectively what your roots are. That's what you're going to be irrigating, that's where your roots are going to grow, that's where your nutrients are going to be put down. Okay. So that's an example of a soil form card. In this case, it's a very basic. There's not a hell of a lot of soil variation in terms of soil forms. All right, you'll see the majority of it, these beige colors, are huttons. So it's a very nice, deep, well-drained soil. In this case, the texture is slightly different to a hutton, for example, from the Eastern Free State. Then we have these purple patches, which are Glen Roses. They're slightly shallower soils. They're rocky soils. And then we have a small bit of cutspruit, which is not a very nice thing. You'll see trees typically struggle extremely, well, they struggle a hell of a lot on these cutspruit soils. It's a very rubbish thing. It's essentially a clay soil. Okay, so those are the 3 ones. So there's not a hell of a lot of soil variation in terms of soil form, which is a good thing. I mean, it's a nice thing. It's a nice situation to have. The next thing is rooting depth. As I've discussed, if you look at this picture here, you have a nice topsoil, decent topsoil. You have a subsoil that effectively looks like it goes all the way down, but your rooting depth is going to stop there. The stuff you see here is indicative of a fluctuating water table. So for maize, that's great. In a very dry here, your maize is going to do extremely well because the roots are going to go down all the way and go suck up that fluctuating water table. But in a very wet year, you're going to struggle because your soils are going to become waterlogged. So that determines your potential, what you want to plant, when to plant, and what to do with that soil. In this case, very nice, deep, well-drained soil, but again, you could have a compaction layer, which is very typical of this kind of soil, at about 300 millimeters, and you need to identify if it's present, and you need to address and change your cultivation practices accordingly. So if you put a hell of a lot of traffic on the soils, on those red soils, in this case, they're going to compact, and you're going to have trouble. Your roots are going to grow in the first 300, and that's it. You're losing all of your potential. Right, in this case, very obvious, very shallow soil, so your cultivation and your ridging methods need to be adjusted. In this case, for example, you would want to cross-rip straight into that rock as deep as you can, because in some areas your rock is going to be friable, and you can improve your drainage and you can improve your effective soil depth, and you're going to have to ridge properly with the soil, because that's all you got, your little bit of topsoil. Okay, so if you look at the rooting depth map, slightly different. In this case, you have a little bit more variation. Here you have 500 mils, so there's a bit of a rock sort of bank that sits over there. All of these soils are slightly shallower, and that's going to have a direct impact on your irrigation. So all of a sudden you have a soil, in terms of soil form, it's all homogeneous, but now all of a sudden your subsoil is limiting at 500 mils. So you're sitting with 500 mils of soil. Okay. With the rest of the case, you have 1,200 mils. So your practices are going to be slightly different. Texture. Very briefly, on the right there we have a very clayey soil, and on the left here we have a loamy sand. Where is it? All right. So on the right we have very clayey soils, on the left we have loamy sandy soils, and that's going to have a direct impact on your infiltration tempo and your irrigation. So you do not want to irrigate these two textures simultaneously. You're going to have to set up your system so that you irrigate the clays, very low infiltration tempo, so you're going to have low flows, and you're probably going to stretch your times in between irrigation sessions quite significantly. On the left, it'll take a hell of a lot of more water at once, and you're probably going to have to irrigate more often. Okay. Here's a very basic chart of how that works. Look especially at the times. So 24 hours is the maximum time until you have infiltration at 72 inches, and the clay soils will take up to 45, 48 hours to achieve the same thing. And your clay soils will maintain or hold that water for much, much, much longer. So it's much easier to drown those soils, whereas the loamy, sandy soils, your plant is going to experience a hell of saturation or saturation point much quicker. All right, so that's also a very nice map for texture. You'll see on the very shallow soils we have sort of silty soils. That's because there's a bit of a siltstone ridge that runs through here. The rest of it is all loam, and then we have some clay down there, and you have some silty loam in these areas. So these areas will behave, even if they were the same depth, they will behave differently under irrigation, even if they were all exactly the same depth. So it's very important to note. And then the last thing, very briefly, wetness. So I'm talking about excessive wetness. I'm talking about anaerobic conditions. So devoid of oxygen, root rot conditions. It's a haven for these kind of bugs. So you'll see there's your water table. In this case is what we call a Kroonstad. So you have again your eluviated zone. You have excessive wetness over there. And in this case, this entire profile is completely saturated for extended periods of time. So that soil on the left is effectively dead. There's nothing you can do with it. So that's why it's extremely important, and especially if you over-irrigate. And that's a very common theme in South Africa, is over-irrigation. If it's hot, we let the water run. I mean, we need to be extremely mindful of what kind of soil do you have, how much water can it take, and what the hell is actually going on in the subsoil. Are you drowning the subsoil? Because once it goes to this, or to this, that soil's gone. Then you only have the topsoil left. And the problem with a soil like this is you tend to over-irrigate very quickly, but it also dries out very quickly because you have water over here. So effectively you have 300 mils, and if you put water down, if you put down for a meter, for a meter, your topsoil is going to drown extremely quickly. But because you only have 300 mils, that 300 mils gets sucked up very quickly by the plant, and your soil dries out. So you tend to completely over-irrigate time and time again, instead of putting down small pulses, small pulses, small pulses. All right. And that is a wetness or sign of wetness map that you do want to see. Green being completely dry. There you have an 8, which is at the bottom of the scale, which is completely waterlogged and drowned, but it's a very small section. All right, so with these kind of maps, with this kind of data, old school soil classification like they did 100 years ago, you can identify the areas where your high potential is, where your potential problems are, where to irrigate. And effectively, at the end of the day, I drew up a very rudimentary sort of irrigation zone map last night. So forgive my limited GIS skills. The GIS department don't like it if you phone them at 1 in the morning. So I did it myself. So if you look at zone 1A, that can all be irrigated together. 3B and 3A can more or less be irrigated together, but it's better if you separate them. 2B, 2A, 2B, those can all be irrigated together, for example, if you must. But the different zones identified here will give you a very nice idea of what should be irrigated together, which cultivars should be planted together, for example, because the extraction rates obviously differ. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Marnus. Yeah, I think, again, thinking about precision, we have to understand that if you just look at the word precision on its own, it's about knowing what to do with the soils where on the farm. And I think if we look at the history of avocados in South Africa, it's either been we've done nothing to the soils and we just planted in them, or on the other side of it is we did things that actually stuffed up our subsoils and the movement of water. And we've learned a few lessons this last 3 months with Marnus, and I think, you know, we'll continue to learn. Paul, as ek jou so lank kan vra. So Paul will just give us a quick rundown on, from an irrigation design perspective, what is the most important considerations. It's been also a discussion that Paul and I have had, because sometimes you have to find the blend between what's possible from an irrigation design perspective and what would be ideal in terms of efficiency, but on the other side, what the farmer, you know, would prefer. So I think, you know, and that's basically what we're trying to do here is first the soil perspective, then an irrigation perspective, then I'll give my perspective about land prep from a farming perspective. Paul, thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Zander. Zander asked me for 5 points for the discussion that follows after this session, of what's following up now. But I've got 7 points, Zander, so you will excuse me for that. First of all, I think, and even if I've listened to Marnus talking before me, the farmer must get the right team together, the right consultants. You can't see irrigation as a standalone thing anymore. It is much more integrated in the whole process. A slide that Zander showed earlier of pruning and what is precision farming. There's pruning and irrigation and fertigation and harvesting. On that slide, I think irrigation has been done every day on a farm. You only prune maybe once a year, you harvest once a year, you spray till a certain time, but you irrigate every day. So getting the right team together that you're comfortable to work with, I think is a very good start. And then your second thing that you must decide is, are you going to drip or are you going to micro? That is a very big decision. There's still people farming drip and micro. There's a big move towards drip on permanent crops. So I think that will be the next point that needs to be discussed. Block sizes, to add on to Marnus's presentation, it's very important, soil types, block sizes, that you look what is practical on that, and design accordingly, and the block layouts. Then main lines, are you going to use dedicated main lines? Are you going to use the old conventional type that you've got one main line teeing off from that? So that is the next decision that you must make, to have zones, certain zones of certain main lines, or filtering. All of us is buying the most expensive drip, but we buy the cheapest filter to protect that expensive drip. I think that needs a lot of attention. The maintenance of filters, that's very important. Fertigation, as you all know, if we move towards drip irrigation, fertigation is essential. You need to put your fertilizer through your drip. You can't put it down by hand. And last but not the least is management. I can tell you and design you the best irrigation scheme, but if the management is not up to it and you don't manage it correctly, talking about scheduling, maintaining it, then it's a failure. So I think on the end of the day, management of your irrigation system is the most important part that we need to look at. Thank you, Zander.
Thank you, Paul. All right, yeah, then from my side, from a land perspective, while my slides are coming up, I just thought about it when Paul discussed it now, is land prep you do once, irrigation you do once, your quality of trees you choose once. If you stuff that up, you never have a chance to do it over. You know, you have to stick for it for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. So it's really crucial to get it right in year one. Okay, sorry, just need to click up. Okay, so I just made one slide just so that you guys have it. orchard slope, from my perspective, plays a huge role in your consideration. Plays a role in the irrigation design, and it plays a role whether I'm building contours or whether I'm going straight lines. We also, I've mentioned it in the past on previous Maluma days, our experience on our own farms has shown that row direction doesn't make that big a difference with production. On cumulative production, we've seen changes of something like 500 kilograms over a 10-year period. So it's negligible, and therefore we rather look at how do we want the rows to go. If we're going straight lines, we want it to be accessible with a 2x4 tractor for most of the year. With our high rainfalls, you can't afford having a too steep slope. Even if you can get in there with a tractor, we've rolled enough tractors, we've rolled enough mist blowers. It's an expensive exercise, so we rather go in a direction. Obviously, that's my preferences. It's not necessarily your preferences. I can never tell you what to do on your farm. This is what I prefer, and I'd rather give this as a guideline to give you an opportunity to think about what you want. Yeah, it affects cultivar, it affects type as well in terms of the slope, because the steeper the slope, if you go too far apart with your trees, the tree height becomes higher and higher. If you have a 60% slope on 10 meter spacing, it's 6 meters that your trees are just planted above the other one. It's not even the tree height itself on top of that. So it's very important considerations. Erosion management, that's one thing that we didn't do enough of. I think Marnus will agree. It's crucial, and it's really not that difficult. And then vehicle access and mechanization, crucial. I need to get in there with a tractor. Your efficiency is just so much higher when you can move with a tractor, and obviously your speed and your ability in terms of foliar sprays. So you have to think forward and say, well, I'm not doing foliar sprays, but I can. You have to think that my alternative, if I can't get in there with a tractor, is 18,000 liters of copper by handgun, or 2,500 liters per hectare with a mist blower. It's a huge cost difference over a 20-year period. And then accuracy. So the accuracy of the design is very important to me. So not just the irrigation design, but the whole land design. I don't want my trees to be in one area to be 5 meters apart. When you move down the row, suddenly it's 7 meters apart. And then suddenly now, you know, the line's too narrow to plant another tree. So I try and get the optimal amount of trees in. So through row accuracy, I get more trees in. And then the next thing is by being able to give Paul an accurate design of my orchard, the irrigation design is more accurate. We've made mistakes where we tried to measure the land before and this and that. We have your contour plan. But as you build your ridges or as you build your contours, somewhere, you know, some line is a bit shorter or longer or this or that. And it's either the guy doing the irrigation, you know, takes a shortcut and just improvises, and that affects the efficiency of the system. Or on the other side, you have to do a redesign of the system. So accuracy to me is crucial. So that's my rundown. Obviously, we can add more things. I try to keep it as short as possible. Because I don't want to make it too difficult. There are things like row length. I don't want row length to be too long. 100 meters is ideal for me. We have areas where we push to 150, but I don't want to go beyond that. Again, it affects irrigation, it affects labor performance. So I think that's basically the most important things for me. Ek weet nie of Pa of Edrean iets hierby wil voeg nie. Happy. All right. So that's it from my side. We can go on to the next one. So what we'll do now, you'll see it's orchard development precision. Now, between Edrean and myself, we'll take you through an exercise that we did first with one of our orchards. If we have enough time, I've put in a few slides at the back to take you down a whole another road. But I think the ideal is that we go through this. I've asked Paul and Marnus to interrupt us as much as they want. If they pick up on something that we maybe went in the wrong direction, or they want to make a suggestion for future considerations, that they do come in. And again, if you have something from the floor that you feel you want to mention, feel free. The idea behind this is to show what we've done, show the mistakes that we've made, and show how we're trying to improve on that. So yes, we're not at an exact precision at the moment, but at least we're working towards that precision. Okay, so soil classification. I just mentioned this to Marnus. He put this up, but I just mentioned to him. So the block that we're focusing on is this section there. That's what we're going to work with. Unfortunately, Marnus only came across our road, after we started with some changes to that orchard, which obviously affected some of what he saw in the orchard, but he could comment on that as well. But at the end of the day, at least it gives us an idea of what we have to do now. I'm not going to explain that. This one just shows the depth potential. You'll see a section of the orchard there on 500, another section on 800. Marnus, ek weet nie of jy iets daaroor wil noem nie.
Something like that. Oh, yes. All right, something like that's very important because it obviously influences how high your ridges should be, how deep you should cultivate, and it also shows the potential. If you've got a 500 mil Hutton in this case, your cultivation practice will be different because what often happens with a 500 mil deep soil is you have quite an intense clay accumulation at the base in your subsoil. So something like this, because it sits downslope, it sits by the dam, you have a lot of clay and you have a lot of topsoil washing in from higher upslope. So you have a lot of clay accumulation in your base and your subsoils, and that will hamper your infiltration. It will also hamper your water settling at the base. So you could potentially have a lot of drowning. So you need to cultivate the soil right onto the bedrock, break it up as much as possible to assist with your water infiltration and to reduce water logging. And just something I quickly want to touch on, I don't know if we're going to talk about it again, but something that's very important, especially in this area where you have high slopes, in another area, Port Shepstone, you have extremely high gradients, you have very intense slopes. And what usually happens is, because of that, you have a lot of erosion, and your erosion will take place in your topsoil, which is your most important part of your soil, and that's all going to wash away. So especially if you are looking to buy old plantation areas. Now, old plantation areas, they did soil mapping back in the day. They usually chose quite good soils, actually, but because of the way they plant and because of their practices, they don't really do a lot of erosion management. And that leads to a lot of loss of topsoil. So you're going to have to rebuild topsoil again with organic matter and introduction of these bugs, these microbes. So it's a very big consideration, especially when you start buying old plantation soils, which there's a lot of that kind of thing around here. It's a very important thing to consider.
Okay, just for interest's sake, one thing that my dad quickly mentioned to me is, if you remember yesterday on Abraham's slideshow where we had that aerial shot of where the bounties made a straight line compared to the Dusa and the Duke 7 in terms of its growth, it's this piece there where the worst soils are. So you can see the bounties is actually on the worst soil in that orchard, and it's performing better than the Dusa and the Duke 7. And again, it ties into what Marnus said earlier, is selecting the right cultivar and the right rootstock for the right zone. So by seeing these soil analysis, you actually get an idea and you have a map. And it's a thing that Paul and I have discussed in the past, is you don't want to run, we actually did it, this orchard is split in two. So that's on one irrigation and this is on a different valve. So we have split valves there, but we don't manage them differently because then you have too little. And this is what actually helps in the end, is that by selecting the right rootstock, you could potentially help yourself not to unnecessarily split irrigation blocks. Paul, I assume you agree. And it just makes the irrigation more efficient. So, yeah. Okay, so this was something that I never took into account. Something I learned is the difference in the A and B horizon. And you can see that's only 200. So if you think about the photos that Marnus pointed out earlier, that's not really deep. So you have to be careful not to go too deep. But now, just to explain it to you, what we did is this orchard had a pretty bad slope down there, and this section here was also pretty steep. So what we did is we pushed the topsoil back, came in with a bulldozer, put it all on a heap, stockpiled, and then we started changing on the subsoil and started playing around there. And, you know, as stupid as we are, I don't care about a B horizon and an A horizon. I'm a farmer, I'm just going to smash the machine in there. So I moved the soil. And whether I actually went into the B horizon or not, I can't tell you. But I think a lot of this, that 200, is because we only put 200 topsoil perhaps on the soil. Because we took our bad soil and pushed it in below and said, well, okay. You'll see later on we did dig profile pits. That's actually evident on the drone photo, so that'll give you an idea. Clay percentage, 25. I think that's 30 if I'm not mistaken. So just the difference in that also I think plays an important role. And rootstock decisions perhaps. The effective depth. So I think that's a 60 and a 90, the effective depth. Don't know if you want to mention something on that.
Yeah, so an important consideration, just to backtrack very briefly, is with the depth of your A horizon and your B horizon. So if you're building ridges, there are certain cases, especially in this kind of area, where if you have erosion of your A horizon, that washes away. So now you're only sitting with your subsoil, your B horizon, which is going to change the way you build a ridge. It's also going to change the way you cultivate and prepare the soil. Because if you don't have an A horizon, in certain soils you can dig as deep as you want into the B horizon and put that on top of the rest of the B horizon and then build a ridge with only B horizon, because the soil texture might be homogeneous. But if you have an A horizon on a B horizon, your A horizon texture might be completely different to your B horizon. And that's an important factor to consider with irrigation, because your A horizon, your B horizon will react differently under irrigation. Okay, so it's important when you have a contrasting A and B horizon, if you want to build a ridge, only use the A horizon. Okay, so in this case, what effectively is happening is you have a much shallower section, so your effective water holding capacity in that soil differs from the one end to the rest, which means that if you irrigate them simultaneously with the same amount of water, the one section is going to start being waterlogged and is going to saturate. The other section is going to remain dry because it's deeper and can take a lot more water. So that's a very important thing to consider.
Yeah, Edrean, I think maybe you should just run us through this.
Thanks, Zander. Yeah, so when we initially started with that orchard that Zander referred to now, we had this situation with the slope, and Zander wanted to build ridges, and he had some experience, terraces, not ridges. And he had some prior experience with doing that on another farm, but we wanted to try and do it better, use a bit more technology. So we brought in the drone, and there you can just see a photo of all the geeks standing around the drone admiring it. Yeah, boys with their toys. So everyone came out to see this thing fly. Yeah, here's the clicker. So that's what we ended up with. This is basically the orchard, goes like that. Yeah,
sorry, I just want to show you, you see the top section, there's a little green patch, and then the white soil's to the left. So that green patch is a tree that's standing there, and that's basically where the drop-off started. But when this first drone photo was taken, we already did some of the soil movement and adjustments. So just to give you some perspective.
Yeah, so this was quite early on. but as Zander just said now, you can see some soil works were already done. So from this, we were able to get a three-dimensional model of this orchard. And okay, yeah, that's a photo of the tree that Zander spoke of. So this gives you a fair idea of the slope going down and then further down to that side towards the dam over there. All right, this is just from the other side. Okay, so we ended up with a three-dimensional model like this with water flow modeled onto that. So the orchard is basically, that's the northern side there. So that's where the tree was, and that's the slope downwards and towards the southern side. So you can see how the water goes into that valley there, and there's another valley there, and that's the road on the southern side. But you can also see within the orchard, there's rivers that's forming, water flows towards the central point and then all over your orchard. And that's something you obviously don't want for erosion and all that. So that was a concern, but what's nice about this is you get an idea of what needs to be done and where you have to go and make your adjustments to try and get this thing to look a bit better. So then Zander brought in all the yellow machines, and they made the adjustments. They dug profile pits all over the place, and you can see nicely how the heaps next to the pits. So you can see the white soil coming out and the red soils coming out. So the different colors there. So this also gives you a fairly nice idea of what's going on if you get a sort of overhead image like this.
But I just want to mention there, just so that it doesn't misrepresent, is the white sections that you see, that's actually the bottom of the soil, because remember that's getting stacked on top of the rest of the soil, because that's the way you dig up. So, so the red heaps is actually where the soil's nice and deep. That's about 1.5 meters. Where it's still reddish. Obviously the photo doesn't show the quality of that soil. It's becomes more and more rocky. But the white sections, obviously that is where you can see where it gets very bad.
Okay, so as I said earlier, this was a subsequent flight when the adjustments were made. So we remodeled this thing again. So you can see there's the northern side again with that valley where the tree is, and you can see there's less water coming down within the orchard. And we kept that as a sort of a moat where the water can go through, and there's a small part of the orchard still left on the southern side, and then that's the road again. So to put them next to each other, just two-dimensionally, you can see on the northern side, that's before and that's after. And you can see with the adjustments made, how we decreased the water flow that was modeled onto this, onto the image. Okay, so then when we were happy with that, Zander started to design how the terraces were going to be formed and laid out, and the rows as well. Zander, I don't know if you want to take us through this.
Yeah, I'll maybe just explain a little bit. Just want to get the pointer quickly. Okay, so if you look at this, obviously that's the one valley that you saw the water flow, and there's the other valley that had a lot of water flow, and there's the road. So if you think back of that previous model. So we said we have no other option than to split this from that, because we need a moat there to take the water out, and it actually comes all the way from this orchard as well. So the planning is to say that even though it's only, I think this whole orchard's 1.4, 1.5 hectares, we're already planning that the day that you replant this, you can just latch onto that. So you put your moat up there, you're already planning to, you know, perhaps take these rows a bit further and change that because there's actually a ditch down here. So it's just the water that forces there. So yeah, this was one of the initial designs, and I just pointed out a few errors in the initial design. These rows bending left actually means they are going downhill. So what we do with these rows is we fix them, like I mentioned during the orchard visit yesterday, between 1% and 5% slope. So that would give you more than a 5% slope. So I would just mark that as an error. So I just marked a few places where I think, yeah, you'll see the rows are very straight. So I knew they weren't following the contour. So we just picked up on a few funny things there. But with this in mind, while doing this, in the back of my mind, I'm already thinking about irrigation. And I think it was relatively just after this that I actually went to Paul as well. Because initially I thought, okay, we'll have to do this as one irrigation block and that as another irrigation block. From micro, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but from the micro, we used to do irrigation block sizes of more or less a hectare per valve. And we took that in our first drip orchards and just kept it the same because that's the way Allesbeste thought. It wasn't something that came from Paul. And then Paul, when we did this orchard, he actually mentioned to me that, you know, we should try and get closer to 5 hectares, I think, per, because that's how our designs were. So I think at this point, Paul, I don't know if there's something that you want to mention, perhaps, in terms of options for irrigation design here. We'll look at your plans later, but if you want to mention something, you can mention it. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's about it. This yellow block that I made there was just to point out that the rows were going into the valley, so we need to look at the valley there, and that's basically it. Sorry, just one other thing. You'll see the dots there, and then another row of dots there. So that is the relative highest point in that orchard. So from that point, you want water to flow downwards. In other words, you can't have water flowing all the way from this point over the ridge and down again onto the valley. So the ideal is to take the ridge and move water down to this valley and water down to that valley. Again, my personal preference, I don't know if there's anyone in the audience that maybe want to correct me if I'm wrong in that assumption, but that's just our experience, is you don't want to move water from one valley across a ridge into another valley. It's ideal that it maintains and it goes back to its own valley.
Okay, so that's just a bit another way to look at this is the thickness of the lines will indicate the slope. So this gives you a fair idea of, as you go within a row, how the slope changes. But this is basically what we came up with then on first try of where are we going to put a road in here. Because Zander he doesn't want the lines to be too long for practical reasons and all that. And you need to get a road in somewhere. You could either take it straight down there or somewhere else. So we figured put a road in here, but obviously you don't want too steep of a slope there, then your water is going to run there and cause erosion again. So we had to take the road from this side all the way up to that side. So that was the initial planning. So later on we improved on that, and this is basically what we ended up with. And then we started to stake out the points where the rows were going to be, and also where the road is going to be, that central road. And that's the stakes. And then the excavator came in, started to build that central road. And that's just more images of the building going on. And when the road was finished, they started building the terraces. So the stakes that you see are basically the plant rows as they were mapped out on the earlier slide. So with the GPS, we came in. It's not a regular GPS like the one in your phone. Those of you that have experience with, yeah, let me just go to that slide. Those of you that are familiar with people that come out and do mapping, that's a very accurate GPS. It goes down to where your phone would usually be accurate to about, at best, probably 5 meters. GPSs like these use other technologies to get to sub centimeter level. So you could be accurate to within a centimeter or so. The cost of these UPSs used to be extremely high because you would buy a Trimble GPS or something like that, and that could run into the, let's say, around the 100,000 mark, I think. He's showing me a 3, so I guess it's 300,000 Rand mark. So, but this is a unit that I think it's people somewhere in Central Europe built this, and it's basically a home-built thing that it's probably, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you would get with a Trimble setup, and you have to supply your own tablet there to the side where you can see what's going on, and it runs other software, and it takes a bit of setup and playing around with the thing, but eventually you end up with something that's just as accurate or close to that accuracy. You get to your centimeter accuracy as well, for probably in the range of 10 to 15,000 Rand. So a huge difference. So that makes it practical for a farmer with a bit of technical know-how to do this staking out himself. Okay. Yeah, so, okay, that's the slide I was on previously. So, started building the terraces. There's more building of terraces.
I just want to stop here quickly, and this is where I'm sure Marnus would like to give me a whip and discipline me a bit. You don't really get the effects of the bad, subsoil, there, but you see it's relatively whitish. But look at the next photo, the difference between the one row and the next row. And this was all with, this was not as much with our land adjustments that we did. This was purely not realizing how shallow the topsoil was and moving into that. So we did adjust it a little bit. But you can see, and it was basically just the last 2 rows on this orchard, probably about 30-meter length rows. But it just shows you to some effect. I don't know if you want to mention something.
Yeah, just quickly on this, what they've done there, and I'm not too upset because it's not a lot, luckily, but what they've done there is they've mixed 2 types of subsoil. And the problem with that is once a root is planted in a certain soil, doesn't matter what it is, sand, silt, clay, loam, doesn't matter. If you plant it in that and the roots start developing in that, if it hits a different type of texture, it's not going to go in there. It's going to start growing horizontally the moment it hits that different texture, unless the texture change is gradual. So if you go from a loamy sand to a sandy loam through the profile over time, gradually, a root will follow that path. But if you go from sand to loam, or in this case, from loam to silt, it's gonna grow horizontally the moment it hits that different texture. So you're losing soil potential, losing soil depth. So it's important when you do any kind of land alterations, because sometimes you have to if you're working with extreme slopes, to try and use the same B horizon all over the place, and to limit using different B horizons and mixing it. If you're mixing soils, you're in trouble. We sometimes see it with irrigation. when guys have pivots and they want to make their pivot as level as possible, sometimes they move soil around, and you can see it in the rooting development, and you can also see it in the irrigation. Water does the same thing as roots. Sorry, just very quickly. Water does the same thing as a root will. If you put water in sand and it hits clay, it starts flowing horizontally. It doesn't go over. So just on a different topic, very briefly, if you guys put in drainage and you have a clay soil and you dig a hole and you fill that hole with sand, that's going to be wonderful for surface water because your surface water is going to run, it's going to hit the sand, it's going to go in. But for subsurface water, water is going to move in the clay because clay has very high capillary action, i.e. it holds water exactly the same way a sponge works. That's why a sponge doesn't flow out of the sponge, it stays in the sponge. So if it's flowing in clay and it all of a sudden hits sand, subsurface sand, it's not going to go in there. You're going to have to supersaturate your soil before it even starts flowing in there. It's going to stay there. So it's very important to consider textures when moving and doing landscaping.
I think just one thing to add is one of the problems when you start building contours is if your slope goes down this way and you're moving across the slope, you're actually taking soil and putting that on top of topsoil. So it's not like a ridge where you're scratching topsoil from the side and topsoil from the side, and you know you'd have a nice. So after this, we were concentrating quite a lot on just taking topsoil, and the moment we hit subsoil, you know, we would look at the depth that we were going in. But fortunately, we didn't need anything much like that again. Yeah, I'll just talk through this, just again, you know, showing how the machines build. Just the interesting calculation. The driver of the big Volvo 20-tonner is hell experienced, probably 20 years or more experience on that machine, whereas our Bobcat driver started last year just after the Maluma day, because that's when we bought the Bobcat. And the comparison between the two is, and Lawrence just correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 40-1 basically, so 40-10, so 4-1, so excavator 40 Rand per meter, Bobcat 10 Rand a meter. So even if we factor in other costs onto the Bobcat, you can safely work on 2 Bobcats on the same cost and speed as 1 excavator. So just the interesting fact, and that's a 5-ton Bobcat. Yeah, just some perspective, you can see the contours starting to develop there and going around. Again, that little bit of soil coming through there. You can see that's that bad patch that we showed earlier. You can see slightly there, again, the photos, I think Edrean will take us through there.
Yeah, so the idea with this whole thing is that each time you make an adjustment, you come in again, fly the drone again, and look at the result until you're happy. We were fortunate that at each stage we only had to do 1 iteration, so every time we thought we were going to be happy, when we did the modeling we were happy. So the reason why we flew the drone again here afterwards is because while Zander was building the terraces, they saw things on ground level that they thought, okay, now maybe we must change this terrace a bit or merge these 2 lines or whatever. So then they did it like they saw fit there. And so we had to fly the drone again to see what the changes were so that we can draw the lines or the rows in again and do the orchard design. So that's what we did. So this is after the terraces, you can sort of see them there, but it's quite difficult to see exactly where the edges of the terraces are. So the nice thing with computer technology is you put a filter through it and then it looks like this. So now you can nicely see where everything is, and then you start drawing in the lines. So that's the green there. I'm not sure if it's that clear. And then you get statistics. So as soon as you've done that, the computer gives you, we've got 57 lines going, just under 3 kilometers of line or row length. The mean row length is 52 meters, and the minimum, so the smallest row is 7.75, the longest row is 144.37 meters, exactly.
So if you remember from what I said earlier, I don't want rows longer than 150. Now if you look at that, I just want to show, I just want to show you, I forgot to mention that. So remember in the beginning we said, okay, one of the most important reference points is the highest point. And then in terms of deciding where we want to put an access road to prevent too long rows, we look at the ground features. So we have a dam there, and that's a fixed point. I have to work around it. So what we decided to do is take all our roads, we do it between 10 and 15% incline. So we took from that point, took a 10 to 15% incline, remained on that, and that brought us to a point. After that, we go and we, on the computer, look at what the maximum row length would be there, and as long as that's under 150, I'm happy. Would it maybe not be 150, it would have been more, then I'll start playing with the point where that road is next to the dam. So maybe switch it to the other side or whatever. So it's very important to look at your fixed reference points, things that you can't move, pump stations, electrical poles, the drone picks up on all of that. So if you have an electric line, a municipal line running through your orchard, you can already plan around that, not get a reach somewhere, you know, and you have a short line that ends up next to an electrical line.
Okay, so once we saw we were happy with the rows and everything, it's basically 2 button clicks and 1 keyboard type, and then you have your trees. So, and it gives you a tree count there as well. So we have 1,510 trees. The spacing is 2 meters within the row. So it works it out for you and it plots it. Yeah, so, well, basically, what Zander just asked me is to just mention the precision of this. So the drone will take pictures, a lot of pictures while it's flying, and it'll stitch them together, and it'll also overlap the pictures. So in doing that, it'll be able to project the stereographic image just as your eyes see. So it'll be able to distinguish depth from the height it was flying. But the drone's GPS is like your phone's GPS. It's not very accurate. So we would come in afterwards. We would come in afterwards and then establish ground control points. Well, actually, we'll do that beforehand. Certain points all over the orchard that are fixed. In this case, we use those profile pits. So we would then get accurate GPS positions of all those points on the image, and we would tell the software, okay, so that's your reference points, and it'll use that to reproject the 3D image to get it to an accuracy of probably, I don't have an exact figure, it'll differ between different let's say models that you build and how well you put your ground control points down, but you'll get to less than a meter, definitely, probably within 10 centimeters usually. So that's basically then the accuracy that you're doing this thing on. So then you can go back, and each of those points you can put it into that GPS unit that I showed earlier with the stake, and then go and plot those points to plant the trees. But in a setup like this, it'll, I mean, you've got the 1,510 points, and it'll probably take you, I don't know, a couple of, well, let's say a minute, minute and a half to plot each point. So it'll take a lot of time to go and plot your trees So the easy way is just to lay down a rope with 2-meter markings on the rope and then stake out your trees like that. But the essence of the thing is that if you don't think in terms of planting, you have a point of your tree or a GPS coordinate of each tree. So this you can utilize to number each tree basically, and then you can keep individual tree records. So if you go to harvest or whatever, you have basically for each tree a geo-referenced position, and you can build up your data according to that. So it will enable you to get to a certain level of precision when you do record keeping as well. So, Zander, I think this is your image.
Okay, yeah, this is basically the point where Paul and I need to start talking again, because now I have an accurate design or an accurate layout of what the orchard looks like. Yeah, then basically biggest advantage with this, in my opinion, is, Paul, how regularly do they take points in the orchard?
Zander, it depends, but if we survey by hand, it's normally on a grid. It depends on the slope, between 25 or 50 meter grids. If the soil is, the slopes is more flat, you can go further. So, but for this, it will be a 25-50 meter grid.
Yeah. Just one thing I forgot to mention. With that model, because we have a 3-dimensional model, we also have a model of how the terrain goes, so basically the contours. So we were able to, from the software, just sort of requested the software to give us a grid of X amount of meters by X amount of meters. It'll plot points in a grid, and for each point it'll give us an X, Y, and Z coordinate. So we were able to get that from the software and send that through to Paul at BACMA, and they were able to use that to import it into their software to do the design with. From that they would be able to establish how the orchard slopes and all that.
Yeah, so if you look at it, the benefit of using this drone, it saves BACMA time for sure, as they don't have to come and take the points themselves. The other thing is what Paul and them do more often these days is they would do our designs based on a Google Earth photo if there's a relatively new one available, just to see where the road direction is. But this takes it to a new level in the sense that you actually know exactly where each row is. If Paul isn't sure, let's say, about the row length, he could ask us, you know, what the row length is.
I think, Zander, just to add on, you're talking about 150 meter row lengths, but why is it 150? You know, we need to answer that question. First of all, hydraulically, we can go much longer with dripper line or irrigation lines, but the trick is coming in when you start to flush your dripper lines. You need a certain velocity in the pipe to do it efficiently. So that's the one reason for that. And then I think from your side, the other reasons for spraying and harvesting. So that is the other limitations what you must decide on your row length. So it's not only irrigation, but it's a combination of practices.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so basically one of my prerequisites is to try and keep my main lines as close to roads where I can, access points. Our current main line runs right here at the top, so that was very convenient. So we said the logical, you know, valve point would either be there somewhere on that road or wherever works the best for the hydraulics. Sorry, I just want to mention, so obviously here, the arrow I pointed out was just to show the relative slope direction. So this would be a decrease in slope that way, decrease in slope that way, decrease in slope, decrease in slope. So I was trying to indicate to Paul and Heinrich what the most logical points would be to put the grommets in, to put the sub-main lines on the rows. So basically, the design came through. You can see we stuck to as close as possible to the roads. Obviously, a downside of contour planting is that a lot of the time it's difficult. You need more sub-main lines because there's too many access points on roads and things like that. But again, I'd rather pay more for a sub-main line today. It's a negligible cost in terms of the long-term production. So this gives you an idea. A few places where we needed sub-main lines just to where, so if rows would split, we made provision so that you don't have a polypipe running and then you have to split it. So I think this is just in terms of efficiency. Initially we had 2 sub-main lines here. It created a pressure problem for Heinrich, and we eventually moved to 1 sub-main line. And again, if you remember, that's on the lowest point there where there's a drainage ditch. So what we did there is we actually stacked it with rock, so you don't have too much erosion there. So much like a gabion, you actually break the water, and the benefit of that is actually, there's no low point as such, so it works well with the irrigation. Okay, so this photo, what it shows nicely is it shows there was, the water didn't run through, there was a dam forming there. Now that's on the moat that we put in, on the drainage ditch. So that was just a little blockage on the system, but you can see the water didn't move across. So it gives you an idea of how badly the rainfall was here and the little amount of water damage you see. And the nice thing is the places where you do find something, you can go back and just adapt it a little bit. Most of the time it's just about the relative slope within the row. So you actually want to bank it into the slope so that the water runs on the inside. First trees going in, getting planted. You can see the row direction, the turns of it, drip lines in, little bit. The color is just a bit bad, so the swirl is actually not that bad, it's just the photo. And you can see how nicely the water, everything moved across, came in here, and there it goes down the drainage ditch on that side. Again, just gives you an idea of the orchard layout. And just in terms of perspective, this slope this side is representative of what this side looked like. So that's the amount of land we moved. The swirl on this side is a lot worse, so the cutting doesn't reflect the swirl quality that was this side. But we did actually, we were able to get a lot more trees in by following this approach. Now, obviously, we need to look at, didn't we damage the subsoils and things like that? Didn't we mix too many soil types? But we definitely, by following this precision approach, got a lot more trees in. Again, the row directions. The places where you see a big gap like that is usually where the angle onto the road is too big. So with the first orchard we laid out like this, we first built all the contours and then came in and built the road last. So just for experimental sake, we said, well, this time let's build the road first and then do the rows. That was a big mistake. It makes it more difficult to actually get the access points to the rows better. So rule of thumb would be always build all the contours first, or the terraces, and then come in and build your road last. Okay, so this is just a little bit, something a bit extra. Sorry. Nearly broke my phone instead of just... okay, so this is an orchard that we're busy with for Nick Iman on Kings Walden. The international people actually, we walked in here, we were more or less there, so just to give you an idea. And you can see the contour lines forming like that. So drop off to this point, drop off to that point. We're not finished with this, but I just felt I should throw it in just to give you an idea again of what is possible, because we're learning as we're going along. This gives you relative slope. So the blue section's less steep, red section's more steep. So our scale that we work on is anything above 15%. We don't want straight lines anymore because your drop off on the one side or the difference between row height becomes too big. So we use 15% as a cutoff, and based on that we would start developing. So this gives you an indication that on this section here you could probably stay on straight lines, whereas here we need to start looking at contours. And again, our preference. Just shows you an idea. We were exploring road options. We changed this quite a bit. And again, this is a very important point to, again, start talking to your irrigation designer, in my opinion. His irrigation dam is this side. So you could gravitate probably most of this, or gravity feed most of this orchard. If I remember correctly, I think this orchard is 15 hectares or something. But his dam is there, so ideally he wants to irrigate from there. The dotted line going down there, the dashed line, is his relative high point. So if you remember what I said, you want your drainage to go downwards and downwards, not across that ridge. So once you start building your contours or your terraces, ideally whatever's on the right of that dotted line should drain to the right and whatever. Again, you can look, if you look on that slope classes and the color codes, you can see, 25% slope there, 35 to 50% down here. So then you need to start looking at density again, row spacing. If you have a 7 meter spacing, well, let's make it an easy one, 8 meter spacing. So you want to plant 8 by 4. It becomes a situation where the difference, you can't go with ridges down there. It's too steep to go down, and going across the slope will give you a 4 meter difference just between the two terraces, and you haven't even planted a tree yet. So, and then on an 8 meter spacing, on an 80 principle, then you're looking at a 5 to 6 meter high tree on top of a 4 meter, land difference. So that's where it becomes beneficial to see these things before you start planning the orchard. And again, once you go into these areas, it makes sense to look at more precocious cultivars, plant higher densities, look at the 4 meter spacing, and even perhaps consider not going in there with a tractor and doing a lot closer. So again, it's all about optimizing on the soil you have available. You can see green section is safe for straight lines. That becomes borderline, so we'll start contours. And you can see here's a section that's a lot steeper in the middle of that green section. So then it makes sense to start building the contours again. The first design of the rows, so what we'll do now is you'll look at that section where the gap is too big. There's a section that the gap's too big. But you can clearly see the straight lines, so drainage would be that way, drainage would be this way. You can see this is 8 by 4, 8 by 4, and then we start looking at closer row spacings. And that would be a 4 by 2 row spacing that we're down there. So again, with Paul sitting here, this is an important part, because now this is the farmer's ideal situation. But now, how do irrigation lines fit into this? Because this was the road, our plans for the road and whatever, but now you need to get an irrigation line running down there. And you can't put an irrigation line straight down because with the change in slope and the contours, you'll have to put an elbow in as your sub-main line goes down. And it's a discussion that Paul and I have had. So you have to actually plan your roads around this so that your roads follows a route that's gradual, and that you can actually follow a simple irrigation design. Paul, I don't know if you want to mention something at this point.
Yes, Zander, I think on the roadside, it's also not only for irrigation, but it's also to do everything mechanically as far as possible. And as you said, you know, on those steep parts, you can easily roll a tractor or a spray car there. But if you also go straight on the contour with your pipes, you know, if you get rain and you can wash away where you've trenched and things like that. So you need to have a look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, basically just explains what I went through, so the areas that bothered me a bit. And I just put this up. The struggle is real. The thing is, it doesn't make sense to have people harvesting like this. I literally just missed this lady, but she was on all fours, you know, with her back to the slope, trying to get up there. I see the Chileans are having a good chuckle about it because they know this. They, you know, you're not efficient when you farm like that. And that's why I say it's the small changes that you do that brings you closer to precision farming. So, you know, being more effective with your labor and your inputs. Yeah, I'm just going to run through this. This was an orchard. That's the first orchard that we did, our first experiment. You can see some of the slopes that we worked on. So this was before the GPS, and you can see stupid things we did where, you know, we worked the wrong direction. You have a straight drop-off instead of a slope drop-off. But it gives you an idea of, if you look at that side, and this is the second orchard visit that we had yesterday. So from that side, you basically have a straight 1 to 5% drop all the way through across this to this point. And that's one of the mistakes that we made, is we should have put a drainage ditch right across there, so that you actually have water draining to there. There's the highest point there, so you could have water running back and water running across this way. So we had too much water running all the way across, and we had some damage there, but luckily now the land has stabilized, so we have less damage. So, and I think the point is that's what we're improving on by using this drone technology and the RTK technology. The cost of this, it's still the same as normal orchard development. It's gone a bit up, obviously due to rates and fuel prices. So this is the presentation that I made 2 years ago. So that's why the figures. And this is just to show something, is if you look at labor rates at that time that I did this, the difference between harvesting without proper access to your orchard and having access to your orchard is about 30,000 rands in a 20-year period. So it makes sense. Again, it's the small things that you do that improves your access and your efficiency with labor. I think that's basically it from my side. I don't know if maybe we should go if everyone wants to say something to close off with. But it's time for tea, so I'll maybe just ask my dad just to close the session for us, and then summarize it, and then we can go for tea.
Thanks, Zander. I assume after tea there will be time, you know, to give people a chance to react on this. Yeah, because I'm very certain there's a lot of questions to be asked. But just to sum up, why all this? You know, I've asked myself why, and why not? And I always say to the boys that we must firstly decide on where do we want to go. You know, I always say, we can go to Cape Town. Right, we agree we're going to go to Cape Town. There's different ways to get there. You could maybe turn your ox wagon around and travel down with the ox wagon. We could go by bicycle, you could walk, you could hike, you could do anything. But in the end, it has to do with efficiency. Edrean once explained to me what efficiency is. He said, Dad, what is the difference between efficiency and to be effective and to be efficient? I said, it's easy. You get a contractor in, say, I want this to be painted, this wall. He said, the effective guy, to be effective, he would take a lot of paint, just in a bucket, throw it against the wall. And it's effective. the whole wall, everything's been covered. It's been painted. Obviously, it wasted a lot of paint, so it was effective. The job was done. So he painted it, and the instruction that you given him, yes, all the walls are painted. You didn't bother about the floor. You could clean that. Efficient guy would use less paint to do the same job, very efficient, labor-wise, paint-wise, material-wise, or whatever, and that's the difference. So what do you want to achieve? Firstly, in farming, I think it's important that you want a return on your investment. Sometimes your investment could be very expensive. You go for higher densities and whatever, it costs you more. And in the end, all the figures must add up. And I think that, for me, is the importance of an event as the Maluma Symposium over the 2 days. Everything must integrate. And I think that is where I want to sum up. It's where we bring together, eventually, technology and science. And agriculture is it's not just farming anymore. It's a science. I think Wessel said that. It has become a true science, but it's the platform where you bring together all the different areas, all the different disciplines that could get together and achieve the very important objective of what Howard Blight pointed out here. The population is growing. There's more and more and more people. We need to feed them. Land, we think there's a lot of land available. Not. Land is expensive. You need to be very efficient in what you do. You can't hoist people up the slopes. So you can. Technology are there, and you could manage all this in the end. And I think that's what's the beauty about precision farming. It's to the disposal of the grower. It's not that expensive anymore. And the nicest of it all is that there's no reason that your boys should end up in the corporate world while you have a platform where they can utilize their skills to be beneficial for agriculture. Thanks, Zander and Edrean and everybody involved.
I just want to mention before we leave for tea, Lawrence, if you can maybe just get up. I initially wanted to give him the opportunity to present something on this because he did a lot of the groundwork on it, although we did the design side. But he had an operation, so he doesn't talk that nicely now. But you are welcome. You see his face. Approach him, ask him about his technical difficulties, maybe suggestions he has, the headaches we've sat with, and you know, we've spent some time on it, on how do we keep on improving on this. And I think that's the important thing, is how do we, you know, visit the site afterwards and say, okay, we can improve on this section, that section, we need to take this into account in the future. So I think that's the important side. I think we have about 4 minutes for questions, if there's any questions. Okay, everyone happy? All right, thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll have to get going. I think at least everyone will start moving in slowly but surely. It's not exactly the graveyard shift, but it seems like everyone's enjoying the cold drink outside. So, yeah, so the two topics for the next session is about labor efficiency and how precisely you can manage labor. And the other one tying into that is harvest precision. So, just waiting for my slides to come on. All right, yeah, so basically, this is very small, but I don't really expect you to try and see there. It's more to sell the idea to you. So if you look at this, Saga used to have management programs like this for avocados that shows you the different times that things happen on the tree. And the main idea is to give you some guidance on what time you should be doing what. So it will show you when there's a flush, when there's a root flush, when there's a summer flush, spring flush, for the different varieties, when flowering starts, when is it harvested. So everything in this management program is divided quite clearly in terms of what you need to do, what time of the year. I think this is probably something that back in the early 90s, you probably found this in every avocado farmer's office, every farm manager's office, and it was everywhere. And I'm quite happy that Andries is here, so he'll probably give some feedback to Saga about this. But I think this is something that we need on our tables again and on our walls, so that every time we walk in and out the office, we know in which section of the plant's physiology we are. Because that's what we need to manage. We need to do whatever we have to do in that specific period. Going back to what we said yesterday, and I think I touched on it this morning, is the culture of our avocado farmers has been one of being almost too relaxed. We got along just fine, but I think we can improve a lot by doing things in specific periods and getting that right. So, for example, I think I heard it on Monday or Tuesday when we were walking on one of the farms, and the comment was, we didn't get around to pruning these trees this year. We didn't, the time got hold of us and we had to go on to the next task. I usually tell my farm managers that, well, it used to be this way, that we would do everything at the glacier pace throughout the year. And then as soon as we need to start spraying, we start spraying on 15 October or 20 October, and we know that's the date that we need to start spraying copper. We know that within 6 to 8 weeks, we need the second spray. It's very well defined that we know we need to be done by that date. So our spraying has been on the dates since forever. But everything else in the year has just been going on, and okay, well, we'll go and do our stem injections and we'll pace through that. So it's about improving on that, and the way that I work with my farm managers is I tell them everything is as important as spraying. So whether you're applying PVA to the tree, whether you're pruning, whether you're slashing under the tree, I want everything to be as efficient as our spraying programs, because then you're managing the tree for the stages it is in. So in terms of my management, what I try and do is look at that area. So if something happens over a 2-month period, or let's say I have to prune over a 3-month period, I have to start after harvesting, I basically work back from the date I need to be finished, and I look at how much time I have left, and I try and work out the pace that I need to be on. So just in terms of trying to be more precise. So before I carry on, I just want to introduce you to Monica. She started in our HR department. She's been working a bit closer with me over the last few months in terms of improving how we can improve on our process management. So yes, it's about labor efficiency, but I want to start on a date and I want to be finished by a date. And it's all about calculations of how much can a person do per day, what does our target need to be, will I be able to finish the job with 5 people or do I need 10 people to do the job in that specific time? And time is money. So I just want to give Monica the opportunity just to run through a few principles that we apply and that we believe is important in labor management.
All right, good day, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Zander. I would like to just explain a few aspects about performance management, which I feel is an outstanding tool for any entity or organization that can really just bear fruit and can only be beneficial to any organization if you invest in it. But firstly, it's very important for us to understand that performance management, it's all about everyone working together, not just on a management level, but it goes back to the lowest level of employment. This process starts when a job is identified, and it ends when an employee leaves the organization. This is a shared understanding where individuals contribute to the organizational goals. This is done through a series of processes that managers use to ensure that employees, activities, and outputs meet these requirements or meet these goals. This is also done through planning, and we need to understand when we do this planning that what must be achieved, what competencies needs to be met when we're doing these activities, and also what developments are needed for our employees. Developments such as a short in-house training that most entities do, or you can use your external skills development facilitators. But again, I truly want every single organization to please make sure that external skills development facilities are investing within the employees' skills. Let it not just be a short-term course where they just attend, but they come back with new skills or better skills to encourage our employees to match their abilities with their roles within their organization. Then secondly, it's very important to specify your requirements within your performance management, to make it clear what are those requirements that this employee needs to meet. You have to select measures. You need to identify factors or key factors that can influence their performance. And it's also very important to allocate the correct resources for these employees to meet these requirements. These requirements should be should be monitored. No employee will go through any task or any requirement if there's no bit of job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is a very important tool. I've experienced it when I had to go out in the field once, where together with the managers and the employees, we had to develop a method to spread mulch that was effective, that could be done in a specific time that was needed. As Zander explained, there's certain activities that needs to be done timelessly because it's needed for the trios within the season. We all came there. Some had shovels, some had wheelbarrows, some had spades, and I had my own shovel. Others had buckets. We needed to figure out which method could be used to spread this mulch in a cost-effective way, in a timeless way. That's why these progresses are very, very important for all employees, not just for farm foremen or farm managers, but for the employees as well. So I encourage all entities to start with this performance management progresses. These tasks can really improve your production, improve your employees. In this way, you create an environment that empowers employees to work at their best abilities at all times. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Looking at, some of you might have read it, there's a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I think a lot of people tend to think that those books are written for people in high corporate jobs, that it reflects them. But one of the principles is that you need to give people the tools they need to do their job. So, and it doesn't mean giving him a shovel when he needs a shovel. It's about enabling him to do what he needs to do in as efficient way that he could. So she touched on training. I always say I'm not at all interested in doing pruning training at a external institution because they don't know how I prune on my farm. They don't know my technique. They will come back and they will stuff up my trees. I need to do that in-house. But I don't want to train them how to handle chemicals. That's standard. They need to know how to do that. So that could be done by an external company. When you look at tools, is how does your management system operate? Does your management on the farm, your foreman, do they enable people or do they detract from people's efficiency? So that plays in a very important part in it. In simple terms, you can't expect someone to cut a tree in the fastest possible time and do his pruning as quickly as possible if his scissor is blunt. So the foreman needs to realize that the scissor is blunt. Actually, you want the person right at the bottom of the labor chain to understand his scissor is blunt and report that to you long before the foreman needs to see that. So there is a whole enforcement discipline that you need to follow, a feedback system, and again, the person right at the bottom of the chain can't feel that he doesn't want to talk to the person above him because he's scared of him, or he can't talk to this foreman because the foreman doesn't give a damn about him. It needs to be a very constructive system. So I just want to take you through the next slide. Okay, so this just briefly shows you a management plan that we use. I don't have a fancy program to run this for me. I went onto Excel one day. I have to compliment Ernst from Subtrop for giving me some idea behind this because I was completely clueless on how to manage my labor, my managers. I never knew where they were. The tractor would be there and I would expect it to be there and I couldn't get it there fast enough. And everything was down to today and it had to be organized today and my phone was ringing off the hook because I had to move tractors from this side to that side and I had no clue what's happening. And Ernst once mentioned to me that while working in a cellar in France, if I'm correct, they were expected to every morning hand in a report of what they did the night before, the day before. And I got thinking and I said, well, okay, I need a process management. I need to know what my managers need to do. I need to get input on what they have to do. And for some activities, we have already employed a rating scale. So they have to go out on the farm, they have to scout what the weed situation is in every specific block. So they have to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5. If it's anything above a 3, I can't spray herbicide. I need to send a brush cutter to slash that. So again, giving the labor the right tool to do the job. You can't expect to control weeds that are this high with herbicide. You'll control it, it'll die, but your orchard will remain filthy. So it's about thinking logically about it, but enabling the manager to know what you prioritize as the most important job and opening the conversation about what he feels is the most important job. So we started this system. I literally took screenshots of week 5 this year. So the way that we work is you'll see the team leaders' names on the right here. Usually this is our more skilled labor, our foreman. We put them in there because they are the retained labor. They know our system by now. They know what we expect in terms of standards. And although you sometimes have permanent labor in the right-hand column, which forms the team, people in red would be temporary labor. So I know how many temporaries I have on the farm. I would know how many people are working in each group. And every team has a label. So I just called it Team 1, Team 2, Team 3. it could be different things. So the activity, summer pruning, so they had to do summer pruning, those blocks have to be done. You would put in an expected date of finalizing the project and when it would finally be finalized. Obviously, we can still improve a lot on this. Obviously, sometimes it's difficult to manage it, but at least I know what's happening. Then you have situations like herbicide. Doesn't happen right throughout the year, so there's a specific slot. It's the summertime. So it's all about planning and saying, okay, so what do I do with that labor when they're finished with herbicide? And the logical next process is stem injections. The people need chemical training, so I know my herbicide team has chemical training. I know it's an activity that starts after harvesting. We start harvesting the end of summer, so herbicide becomes a less important job. So then you start planning your processes so that one process latches onto the next process so that you could actually manage that. So now you start managing your labor force, you plan your labor quantities to get that job done. But obviously, now if I say, okay, I need my herbicide team to be done by mid-March when I want to start with stem injections, I need to plan my head around that, and I need the teams to get through that work, that piece of work before that date. So then you have to look at what their performance is. You know, if, let's say, for simplicity's sake, 5 people can do 10 hectares in a week, but I have 12 hectares, I need a 6th person to help me finish so that I can have that 12 done in a week. So it's about controlling whether you're ahead or whether you're behind and managing the labor. Then also it enables you to try and track labor and who is more efficient and less efficient. So we move on to this spreadsheet, and I'm just going to give Monica just the opportunity to explain to you how we do the data capturing. A lot of people feel that this is a very tough process, and how do I get the data, and how do I get the information? But I think she'll give you a rundown on how we do it. Obviously, the more blocks you have, the more people you'll need for data capturing. If you have 3 blocks, again, it's different.
Okay. The data that you see on the screen at the moment is just one of our activities, but every single activity has its own spreadsheet, which we allocate certain information to see how activities are done and how much time it takes and how much employees we need to complete these activities. So management and farm managers would come through to HR and explain to HR that we need a certain activity to be done from this day to that day. Then I go through a series of data to go and check how much employees we're going to need with the certain resources that we have to allow employees to complete their task within the time period that is given. So we start off with a spreadsheet that is collected from my office at the Human Practitioner Office. This spreadsheet entitles the time, the activity, the certain activity that is going to be done. Then the team leader of the specific team has to then complete this spreadsheet. Also, it has to allocate which farm they are doing this activity, and also how many employees are working with the team leader, so that we can see how much time is needed for every employee to complete this task. After receiving all this information, we capture it within this spreadsheet that you can see over there. The date is right over there, and the amount of employees, how much time they took as a group to complete the task to make sure that there's no loafing and that they meet their targets as well. And also how much product is being used. If there's a certain product used, they also capture if they use 25 kg or 200,000 liters to complete whatever activity that they're doing. Thank you.
Okay, so if you think back of the definitions of precision agriculture that I mentioned earlier today, it said that it's using the information to your disposal to make better decisions, to farm better or to farm more accurately or more efficiently, to get better yields, better profits. So this is about decision making, but it begins at collecting the information. So you need that information. So yes, the maize farmer has a machine that drives through, or a tractor that collects the data. We need to collect it by hand. We don't have a machine that can collect it. So our fertilizers, for example, it's too little quantities per tree to do it by machine. Unless you get to a point that, yes, we can design technology with a backpack and the guy just disposes X amount at every tree. But then you need something that's electronic, calibrated, but it might happen in the future. So the most important step, and this ties into what Edrean does, is Edrean can't get around to programming everything into our business program or our management program within 1 year. So our job on production side is to start building the data, to start building the algorithms that he could use to start programming. So at the end of the day, even if you don't get around to analyzing the data yet in terms of which laborer is faster than who, we just at least want to start collecting data so that we know by the time that we can start managing them, we have 3 or 4 years worth of data of how much kgs a laborer could apply of this type of fertilizer per day, per hour, whatever. It's important to calculate the 2 man-hours on specific jobs. So how many hours of manpower do I need to get a specific job done? But what is nice about starting to do things like this is you collect data in terms of the amount of kgs being applied over an amount of time, over amount of hectares, over amount of trees. So although we decided when we started with our fertilizer programs that we want to look at how many kgs does a laborer apply per hour per specific fertilizer, because remember, you might apply 500 grams per tree a lot faster than 150 grams a tree, if you look at the walking time and everything in terms of applying it. So or the other way around. So we decided, okay, we want to look at kgs per laborer per hour for every specific fertilizer. So if I just want to look at potassium sulfate applications, I can filter on that column and I can say, okay, I want to see potassium sulfate. What's the average kgs over my different blocks per laborer? So now that I have that kg, I can say, okay, well, what is the total amount of potassium sulfate that I need to apply over the next 2 weeks? I have the total kg amount, and then let's say it's 13 kgs per laborer. I divide the total amount by 13 kgs per laborer, and I know I need 50 laborers to apply the potassium sulfate. So it gives you endless opportunities, because you can now, let's say in 2 years' time, you say, well, this is not necessarily worth my while. I want to see how many trees can one laborer apply per day. So it's not about the grams, it's about the trees perhaps. You want to manage it in a different way. The data has already been collected. So by just doing calculations in Excel, by changing what you divide with what, you get a new norm. So it's all about establishing different norms and different measurements of effectivity of labor. Then another thing to point out is we don't have standard norms for all our orchards. It's a faulty argument, because you have different spacings, you have different slopes, you have variances of rows that are 300 meters long versus rows that are 7 meters long. You have variance in the slope, 5% slope versus 65% slope. So you can't expect a laborer to do the same amount of work on that orchard as in the next. So we have to look at that. That's our opinion, and that's why we believe we're getting closer to precision agriculture, because now I'm at a point where I can set a norm per fertilizer that I want to apply, per spacing, so 7 by 7 or 8 by 4 or 7 by 3.5, per block, per farm. So I'm getting ahead of actually setting norms for specific scenarios on specific farms, for specific products. So it's just about enabling us. to do more things. So basically, if you look at the two, that's January that was completed. So by the time of the screenshot, the white lines are blocks that haven't been applied. So theoretically, I would have to go and look at this and say, well, okay, we need to prioritize between these blocks. So I didn't make a screenshot of that, but if I go onto my dad's fertilizer programs, I can say, okay, let's say, I just want to have a look. Zinc sulfate. So let's say I'm busy with the zinc sulfate. I could go onto his application instructions, and I can go onto the leaf norms, and I can see, so the lowest value is on that block. So there's no sense in starting at block A1B because it's right at the top and work my way down. I need to prioritize. And if it's B1 that is the lowest on its zinc value, then I need to go in there and need to apply that first. So again, by prioritizing, I'm farming more precisely, and I'm prioritizing which blocks get what first. So that's the methodology that we follow. I think it's, to me, this is working for us. I think one thing that I can explain is different tasks we manage differently. So let's say you look at slashing in the orchard. Your tractor has a specific speed that it runs on. You might want different speeds for different orchards in terms of safety of operation. And because that thing has a fixed speed and it drives X amount of meters per hour, you can calculate by knowing what your row length in each orchard is exactly how much time it will take to slash your farm from point A to point B. So it's by thinking about things like this and managing everything differently. I mentioned about the Falco scissors. We don't do it yet, but now I have an idea what I need to do. I need to go in and need a counter on the scissors. What we do in the Grenadellas, for example, is when they go in and prune, they have these sheep counters, those clickers. So they would go, and every time they finished with a tree, they click. They finish with a tree, they click. They finish with a tree, they click. And then at the end of the day, they write up their totals. They give it to Monica to put into the program. And our check for them is we trust them to do it correctly. But at the end of the day, if they're through the orchard and they have 6,000 clicks, but there's only 4,000 plants, we know that they were dishonest. So then they get disciplined for that. So it's a whole system of they need to understand what the job is about and why we're doing what we're doing. So that's it from our side. I think because labor is a very sensitive issue and because wages are going up, I do want to give the opportunity, if there's questions, that we do discuss this a bit. And to me, it's about getting suggestions from the floor about different ways that we could possibly manage labor. So that's it from my side. I don't know if there's any questions, any discussions, any suggestions. Nothing. I hope we didn't confuse you. All right.
In Australia, each of our growing areas have a phenology graph. Now, do you have those? You have the graphs? Ah, okay. Sorry, Wales is sort of set up quite differently to that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the phenology graph is obviously the one that I showed right in the beginning. And we are revisiting them. That's why we did it on our own design. And we haven't finalized it yet because the point that I was making is exactly that. You have phenology graphs, but people stopped following it. So it's trying to get back into that practice of knowing what has to be done when. Okay, any other things? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Edrean to give you an idea about how we see the future of precision harvesting. Again, if you look at the combination of harvesting and fertilizer, that's the one thing that ties in precision agriculture, is the ability to set a crop and fertilize for that crop based on the specific small areas that you need to apply differently. And if you want to apply fertilizers differently, you need to be able to send your laborer to go and collect data or soil samples or leaf samples at your worst areas and at your better areas. So this is a crucial part of improving our precision concept.
Thank you, Zander. This is actually something that I haven't seen before in the fruit industry. It's something that's quite common when you working with combine harvesting and those type of things, when you the guys with the big tractors and the GPS on the roof, and the machine sort of spits out a map that shows you what your tonnages was for specific areas in the orchard. So with fruit harvesting, it's obviously a bit more complicated. We don't harvest with machines and all that. So we try to get a bit closer to that. Actually, our initial idea wasn't to include the GPS thing. We didn't even think about it. We just wanted to accurately measure in the field each person's bag weight. So when he harvests a bag, the laborer, you know what each bag weighs, and in the end you'll know each person how much kilograms he has picked for the day, and what your total kilograms are. So we started with in-field scales, and we wanted to know this in real time. So what we found at that time in the market was basically scales that you could use in-field with loggers, but you had to do the whole session of harvesting and afterwards go back to the office, download, and then you'll have your data in Excel or whatever format. And we wanted to take it a bit further than that and have it available in real time. So we basically just took a regular hanging scale that could output its data, and we slapped a Bluetooth transmitter onto it, and we used a tablet. I can quickly show you. There we go. So we have our, we've spoken on previous Maluma days about this. We've created our own app. Initially it was for gathering soil moisture scouting. So when guys go out and want to scout for soil moisture, we would know what the GPS coordinate was, so that we could go and see if if the guys are scouting correctly. So we extended the mobile application so that we could do the harvesting with that. So then what we would do is each laborer would have his RFID tag. He'll pick his bag of fruit, come to the scale, scan in with his RFID tag, weigh his bag on the scale. It would be captured by the tablet, and when the transaction is finished, he will go on to put his bag into the bulk bin, the fruit, and from the application, it would be uploaded to a central database. And the nice thing about it is you start to, in real time, you can start to get sort of a list of all the laborers and how many bags they've picked already, and a statistic of bags per hour. And that's constantly updated as time goes by and as people bring in new bags. So you can see who's your good harvester and who's the bad one. Unfortunately, it's name and shame here, so I hope none of you know one of those people. But yeah, so the figures there are a bit, they look a bit bad, but it was just a demonstration thing, so those aren't real figures. We're hoping to get much more than 3.3 bags per hour. So don't see too much into that. But so that's basically where we started off with this thing. And then by the beginning of this year, it dawned on me that why don't we have the tablet there and it's got a GPS in it, why don't we just take a GPS coordinate with each bag? So we already have a system where the tractor is standing in the row with the bulk bins on a trailer, and as they harvest, as they move to the new or the next set of trees, the tractor will move forward. So the scale is always there where the trees are being harvested. So taking a GPS coordinate at the scale will give you an indication of which trees were harvested, and in doing that, you'll start to get a figure of kilograms at a specific spot. So then you can map it in the orchard. So just going on, basically what that's saying is it just prompts the scanning of the laborer's tag. It goes onto a screen where the scale's weight is displayed there and who it is and everything, and you save that. And the other thing here that I'm showing there is as you're going along, you can pull up a menu that tells you what's the total amount of bags, so you don't have to sum that by yourself. So, and how many laborers are working in this session, what's the total of amount of bins that you have filled up to now, and the total net weight for the session, and that's updated, and the average bin weight as well. So that's constantly updated as transactions are being done. So what you end up with, I hope it's not too unclear, but you can see all those red dots, hopefully. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a full block. We only started harvesting on Monday for the year. So this is all I can show you. But you start to get a picture of where there's more fruit and where there's not so much fruit. And the nice thing about this example is it's actually a quite bad block. You can see a lot of trees missing and all that. So it should give us a nice indication. But what you can do now is you can start making a heat map like this. So when we've harvested this whole block, hopefully it'll give us a nice picture of where's the hot spots, where are all the fruit, and where there are less fruit in the block. So you start to develop a picture of what's going on. It's not only a figure of so many hectares, so many tons per that block or whatever. You get a better picture. And now you can start to overlay this with something like your soil mapping and try to see if there's a correlation there. Or you can overlay it with nutrients that you've put down, if you've georeferenced that. So you can start to do all these kinds of things. You can take satellite imagery or drone imagery, the NDVI, with an NDVI that's been through NDVI processing. You can also see in terms of tree health, how does that correlate? So it just gives you a bit of a better picture of what's going on and why is it happening. So I think that's just basically what I wanted to show for the moment. I don't know if Zander wants to add anything, or someone else.
Well, is there any questions for Edrean? Any comments?
I think the important part of this collecting data is to measure why we have a big yield in one place and why not, and then to change what we do. More fertilizer, different pruning, different irrigation. If you just collect the data and then do anything with it, it doesn't help.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very valid point. So it just illustrates why you need to look at different facets. You can't look at precision on just a certain facet. You have to look at, if you're going to look at precision in terms of harvesting, that's very nice. You're going to get a picture of where's a lot of fruit and less fruit, and next year it might look different, but you'll never know why. So you can't do anything about it. So you have to start measuring other things accurately as well. So it's about this whole total package of things that you have to measure accurately so that you can try and find correlations. And if you go and speak to data scientists, which is a thing nowadays, by the way, we're dealing with so much data that there's, I think lawyers are going to disappear and we're going to sit with data scientists maybe. But so if you go to speak to those people, they have all kinds of fancy algorithms that they can run your data through and it'll find correlations by itself, but you need the data. You can't do anything without the data. So our role as producers are to gather this data as accurately as possible, and then we can do something with it and make decisions afterwards. So thank you for your comment.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think that's why we have this whole objective of our own integrated system. And the idea should be, like you said, is to, at the management meeting, show the specific farm manager that, okay, we've just finished this block, this is what it looks like. So we're going to start pruning now, we're going to start with our irrigation period and this and that. So over the last season, this is what the heat map looked like. Perhaps in 2-3 years' time, you can even refer back to the last 3 years' heat map. And if there's a correlation that there's a specific point or points in an orchard that is struggling or giving worse yield, you can ask the manager to go and investigate that and write a report back to you to say, well, you know, yes, the trees are too vigorous. We need to focus on growth control on those trees. Or no, the trees are yellow and they're struggling, you know. Is it a sunburn issue? Is it a fertilizer issue? Because there's so many things that can cause it. It's not a simple crop that, you know, it's just fertilizer, water equals crop, or yield. So I think it's very important to, again, enable the manager to come back with his suggestions about what it is that he saw in the orchard.
Just thinking, you know, what you said, obviously one will have to look at those different spots and see how you're going to efficiently manage them. And we have the tendency that when we plant a block that we hate it to mix rootstocks. We always say it must be one rootstock, but maybe this opens the window to say, when we identify those spots, that we say maybe a specific rootstock that's more adaptable to that specific conditions should be in that, call it hot spot if you want to. And I think it's something that we need to think of. If we think, Zander pointed it out, we specifically planted the Maluma on Bounty on that weak ground, on that weak soil that actually later came up. We knew it was not good soil, but later AGRI-TECH did the mapping. And I didn't guide them. And eventually they came up, that is difficult soil. And we know by now that certain rootstocks do very well, and with Hass, it's definitely the case. If the soil is virgin and very fertile, Bounty would not carry good fruit on those Hass trees, whereas Dusa does. And it just maybe, you know, that there's so many tools that you could use. I'm just thinking.
Any other questions or comments?
How do you know when to harvest? What is your harvesting criteria, and what is your policy for forecasting estimations in the future?
What is our policy? Okay, so question is, when do we know, when do we plan to start harvesting on that on the one side, and then the other thing is, how do we do the forecasting. So in terms of the crop, we look at the different cultivars' moisture levels or dry matter levels. That's the first step. We plan that into a program again of, let's say, we want hash to be harvested from week 15 until week 34. We split that up into equal amounts so that we have a constant harvesting rate. We don't want peaks in our production. It makes life difficult for the packhouse, makes life difficult for the marketer and for the farm as well, because you can't plan labor. So the norms that he showed in terms of harvesting rates, so let's say it's 5 units per hour, how many days, how many hours a day, how many days a week, and then how much time do we have to take that crop off, so how many labor do we need, and so it's a whole coordinated function. In terms of crop estimates, at the moment we do 10% estimates of a block, so we would literally start on a corner of a block, look at the amount of units on a tree, count 10 trees, measure again, count 10 trees until the end of the orchard, collect that data and extrapolate it as a orchard value. I think Edrean can maybe just elaborate on a process that we started now to look at drone technology also to help with crop estimates, and what other technology might be available.
What Zander referred to now is there was a study done in Queensland, and what they did is they used vegetation indexes, of which NDVI is probably the one most known, but there are a couple other ones as well. So they used satellite imagery and with these vegetation indexes, and they tried to find correlations with fruit count, or let's say yield. So in order to do crop estimates by satellite imagery in effect. And they found quite good correlations, had quite good results. They did it on avocados and macadamias, by the way. And the only thing about it was that to get the good results, they had to use different indexes on consecutive years. So the problem with that is obviously that this year you might have to use NDVI, and the next year you might have to use GNDVI or something. But you wouldn't know beforehand, so you wouldn't get a good correlation. But if you do get a good correlation, it tends to be better than manually going out and counting fruit. They were more accurate than a person going out and doing a crop estimate. So obviously there's still refinement that needs to be done there. I think it's good groundwork. I don't know if they're going to continue with that research. But I mean, it just gives you an idea in future. I mean, I think there are other imaging technologies that can be used as well in terms of thermal imaging and all that. We should at some stage get to a point where we would be able to do fruit counts from the air. And that would obviously be very nice, less labor intensive to do a crop estimate, more accurate. And the other thing is, if we can get to a point, obviously, that you can do fruit sizing as well, because if you can see it on an image, software would be able to do sizing on the fruit as well. So you would be able to, if you go in regularly through a single season, you would be able to plot the growth of your fruit. And that would give you a nice tool as well in your management. So you could try and influence it and see the results. But I think these things are maybe, well, I'd like to say a couple of years away, but nowadays things tend to happen rather quickly, so technology-wise. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but the Australians seem to be working on it. So yeah, I hope they get success.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Nothing? Right, I think, yeah, just from my side, I want to congratulate Edrean. Although we're in the same company, it's, this is really something new to the fruit industry, and it's groundbreaking work that they are doing. And I think, you know, it's exciting to see it happening and to be a part of it. So for Edrean and his team, I just want to congratulate them. Then from my side, I think that concludes our program. I thank you for staying around until the end. For the people that have been invited to the Netafim workshop at 2 o'clock, please just remember about it, and we'll leave from lunch, and you can just follow us through that. Then I just want to ask all the overseas visitors just to stay behind, all the international visitors, sorry. Yeah. Christo, jy is nou nie oor die see nie, maar jy kan ook kom. So all the international visitors, please just stay behind us for a quick photo. And that's it from my side. I really want to thank you. I think I'll leave a last word to my dad. Thank you.
Actually, that's not the reason why I came to the front. I just wanted to remind him to get the international guests just to come to the front so that we could take a photo. But while he gave me the mic, I want to use this opportunity. Yeah, those that know me, you know, never give me the mic. But while having the mic in my hand, firstly, I would like to thank the international guests that came all the way. I've mentioned it during the program, but to those of you that didn't hear it, you know, it's from Australia, from Peru, from Chile, from Israel, from Egypt. It's quite a large number, quite a large distance that these people traveled. And I think that's what we wanted to achieve. As Zander, years ago, when we started with this first, what we at that time called a Maluma Day, was to create a Maluma family. And I think Zander has been extremely successful in achieving that. And particularly for you that traveled so far, we really, really appreciate it. For those that travel quite a distance also within South Africa and from the surrounding countries, Mozambique, Zambia, those places, yes, that's one thing. You just need to page through the social media. We all know avocados has become so popular. And it's actually fantastic that avocados bring us all together so that we share something surrounding avocados. And we learn, in the end, I think the important thing is to learn from each other to serve this wonderful fruit. I can't let you go without thanking Zander and his team. Zander was instrumental in seeing the opportunity to start at the time a Maluma Day, which was born from a meeting we had in a boardroom to address certain difficulties we experienced at that time, quality-wise post-harvest with Maluma. And since then it has grown to become a platform where we bring people together, where he actually and his team bring people together that shares certain common interest in certain goals we want to achieve, which you've been well exposed to during this symposium that went over 2 days. Thank you very much for each and everyone who has attended, and obviously your contributions you have made. And yes, the nice thing is we often see you, because what we've noticed is that people are very proud of wearing their Maluma shirts, and so we keep on identifying ourselves with this big family. Thank you very much. Enjoy farming with Maluma, those of you that already got it, and those that intend to grow Maluma, either by growing it or marketing it or selling some product to support us to be successful. Thank you very much for attending, and have a nice day further and a wonderful whatever in front of you.
Thank you, and travel safely.